All right. I'm calling this meeting to order on today, Thursday, August 22nd at 6:30. Charlie, can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Barrera has an excused absence this evening. Commissioner Donaldson?
Here.
Commissioner Keller?
Here.
Commissioner Young? Here. Vice Chair Thompson?
Here.
And Chair Guerrero.
Here.
We have a quorum of 5 commissioners present.
All right. At this time, I want to open up the floor for public comment for any items that are not on tonight's agenda. All right. Seeing none, moving on. All right. Want to move to approval of the action minutes for the last meeting on July 25th, 2019. Have a motion?
I have a comment.
Nope.
Just a change, a requested change. But I guess I'd motion to approve with the change. So in 9.2, while the commissioners expressed general support for reducing the minimum parking requirement, only 2 commissioners supported its total elimination. Can we change that to actually what the count was? If it was 2 and 4, because there were 6 commissioners present?
Oh.
Rather than only?
Sure. Let's see. 9.2, yeah, okay. Right. So I would say all 6 commissioners expressed some kind of concern, various issues. I only heard 2 say that they would support total elimination. So I could somehow reword that to indicate that there were 6 present and
Yeah,
2,
just so it's clear.
How about if I say of the 6 commissioners present, only 2?
Sure. Yeah, as
supported
long
it,
as
so
you can understand the count.
Yeah, okay.
Are there any more comments from the commissioners?
I'd second her motion.
Great.
Is that without exception?
Yep.
All right.
All right. So we approve the minutes. Moving on to the Community Development Director's report.
Yes, thank you. The City Council has not met since your last meeting on July 25th, since they take a recess in August. However, I do have some other things to report. The council is scheduled to make an appointment to the vacant Planning Commission seat at their next meeting on September 3rd. The applicants include Erica Mendez, Flyana Rogers, and Deepak Sohani. Hopefully, one of them will be joining you as a commissioner at your next meeting on September 26th. Just like to remind you all that the Rotten City Block Party is this Saturday, August 24th, day after tomorrow, from 11:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. There will be lots of fun activities for the whole family, including the Rottenest Dog contest. So I hope you'll bring your ugly dog to hopefully win a prize. There will be a community meeting on the 47th Street Homes Project on Thursday, September 5th at 6:30 p.m. at ECCL in the multipurpose room at the corner of 53rd and San Pablo. This is a proposal to replace 4 existing single-family homes at 1034 to 1042 47th Street. To replace them with 6 new units in 3 duplex structures, and a Planning Commission study session is tentatively scheduled on this project for your next meeting on September 26th. Again, that's on Thursday, September 5th at 6:30 p.m. at ECCL is the community meeting. There will be a block party at Bay Street on Friday, September 13th from 5 to 10 p.m. This is co-sponsored by the city, and it's a benefit for the Emeryville Senior Center. And finally, the annual Coastal Cleanup Day this year is on Saturday, September 21st from 8:45 a.m. to noon at the fire station on Powell Street. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you, Charlie. Do we have any questions here from the commissioners?
Charlie, I have a question that wasn't on your report, but it's just a question I have. I've noticed when I go by the Avalon at Public Market Apartments that there are occupants in there. There's sidewalks are not completed around the building. So did they get a temporary occupancy?
Yes, they did. They got a temporary certificate of occupancy for the first phase. I don't recall the exact number of units. I think it's about 30 units. So we make sure that that portion of the building is safe to occupy.
And do they have any landscaped areas? Is the courtyard open or?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
That'll all be done, obviously, before they get their final certificate of occupancy.
All right, any more questions? All right, moving on. We're going to go ahead and move on to the disclosure of conflicts of interest and any ex parte communications.
I'll be recusing myself on the first item on the agenda because of the proximity of my residence.
Thank you, Commissioner Keller. Any others? All right. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the first item on the agenda, item 7.1. This is a public hearing for the Marketplace Redevelopment Project, Parcel C. Maru, you have a presentation for us?
Yes, I do.
Great.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. This is an item related to the Marketplace redevelopment project, and in particular, we are talking about Parcel C. As you may recall, Parcel C is a 30,000 square foot grocery store with about 66 units and associated parking. The project has been built, at least the commercial component has been built, while the residential component is currently under construction. So like I mentioned, PDP Marketplace was approved in August 2008, and Parcel C was one of its component. The conditions of approvals of the PUD PDP lists a variety of civic and commercial uses that are permitted on this site. That is on Parcel C, and these include but are not limited to administrative and business office, indoor sports and recreation, retail, and research services. However, the FDP, which was approved in May of 2015, calls specifically for a grocery store on the ground floor with the parking and the residential units. New Seasons had leased the building to install a grocery store, and it even constructed tenant improvements. However, in February of last year, they issued a community announcement that they would not be opening the Emeryville store. Subsequently, it was learned that they had decided not to open any new stores that were planned in California. The applicant, CCRP, and also the master developer of the site have had discussions with over 37 grocers, both large and small, about taking over the space from New Seasons. The applicant has also considered a small grocery store in space between Urban Outfitters and the Guitar Center in the idea of giving some grocery facilities in the marketplace. What CCRP states is that the current uncertainty in the grocery store is because of the Amazon's purchase of Whole Foods, as well as the internet-based meal and grocery delivery options that are there now, all of which make grocery companies hesitant to invest in brick and mortar facilities. And it is for this reason that CCRP is requesting a modification to the conditions of approval of their Parcel C FDP pertaining to the uses that are permitted on the ground floor. So what they would like to see is a change in use from grocery store to either office, fitness and recreation, research and development, and retail. All these uses were uses that were conceived and approved by the PUD PDP back in 2008. So to this extent, we consider that proposed modification is consistent with the conditions of the PDP, as well as with the vision of the PDP. You know, the Marketplace PDP is conceived as a mix of a commercial and residential uses to create a vibrant community, vibrant development with activities occurring both in daytime and nighttime hours. The proposed commercial uses will support the existing almost 95,000 square feet of retail that is there, and also about 34,000 retail ground floor space that has been entitled for the future construction of Parcel A and Parcel B. Therefore, the proposed change in use from grocery store to office, research and development, other retail, and commercial recreation type activities is considered both consistent with the conditions of approval of PDP as well as the vision of the marketplace development. The staff report has a fairly extensive section on the environmental review, the gist of which is that an EIR was done for the PUD PUD PDP back in 2008, and during the time of FTP for the parcel C, an additional traffic study was done to accommodate for the grocery store. Grocery store is essentially the most intensive use of all commercial, including all retail. Therefore, the change in use will not have any additional or more impact on the traffic and the peak hour trips. With that, I conclude my presentation, and we are approving approval for this modified conditions of approvals. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer.
All right, thank you, Maru. Are there any questions here from the commissioners? I think we can start with Commissioner Young here. Am I right?
Great report, Maru. Hey, and so in the future, should they go back? So let's say there's some occupancy that takes it, and it should go back to a grocery store for some time future. So one would think, as long as the codes remain the same, someone would be able to move. A grocery store would be able to move
Absolutely.
into there in the future.
Correct. This change does not preclude a grocery store from coming back in the future. We are not removing grocery store as a possible use.
Okay.
We are just adding uses.
Okay, great.
Commissioner Donaldson?
That was my question.
Great. Commissioner Thompson?
Yeah, I have a question about the most intensive characterization. On what criteria is it most intensive?
So if you look at the staff report, it talks about peak hour trips for
So on
grocery
traffic.
store. It's traffic.
Okay, yeah. So, and I just wondered if it had, if it was also considered most intensive on other criteria like air quality or other things.
Well, traffic determines air quality. I mean, those two are related.
Yeah.
So with that idea being, that's the basic idea of what the change would be. So we do not think that there would be any additional impacts, additional non-traffic related impacts, which have not been already examined in the various CEQA-related documents that have been prepared for the site.
Okay, and then the other question I have is, do you have definitions for these proposed uses? Because I didn't see
yes.
them in my packet, but did I miss them?
No, they're not in your packet. They are defined in our zoning code. And they're defined, yeah.
And the reason I asked that is because research services versus research and development, like I didn't know what the word development, how that would
Okay,
change things.
I can explain that. So the research services, those use classifications in the PDP were done in 2008. And they were under the old planning definitions, the old planning code. Subsequently, the current planning regulations have been updated because the general plan was updated. So the classifications have changed a little bit. So the column that you have, the first column of the PDP, and the proposed uses are corresponding to each other.
Okay.
So research services, for example, would be research and development in today's planning, in our current planning regulations.
And so the definitions haven't changed?
Well, the research, slightly, they have changed, but they are still pretty similar in terms of the intensity of uses.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I don't have any questions at this point. I'd like to invite the applicant up if you would like to address the commission.
Good evening, commissioners. Good to see you all again. As most of you probably know, we've been working on recreating the public market for over 6 years. We had this vision going back 6 years ago to create this great gathering place for the community and beyond. And one of the integral parts, as you all know, was this grocery store. And so back in really December, when we first started hearing that of 2018, that New Seasons was not going to open, we were, hard to believe, more devastated than the community was. And so we've worked really hard over these last almost 20 months to find a replacement. I mean, at the time when they pulled out, we had achieved good momentum. We had leases out to a variety of tenants, and the tenants pulled the plug not knowing who the grocer was going to be. So it was really very problematic for us. So we've been very incentivized to go out and find a new grocer. And over this 20 months, it's the list that we've talked to many times is up to 50 grocers. And I'm going to just read you who they are and give you a sense of why they turned it down. So one of them was Safeways in Andronico, and we've been back to them several times. And I'll just quote, they turned it down. The site would not be a good fit for us. The trade area from the research provided could be realistically penetrated. The project numbers could be possible, but we don't see that as being likely. We feel it's a tall order to convince shoppers north of Ashby to pass the Love Berkeley Bowl. The southern border is isn't realistic since West Oakland folks are not going to pass Pack and Save or the new PCN for their needs. Most difficult will be pulling people from the east, where Adeline hooks into Market. We see shoppers east going to Berkeley Bowl or Whole Foods, and there's a Rockwood Safeway. So we don't think this is a location for us. It's a pass. Whole Foods we probably talked to at least 6 times, and their answer was no interest at this time. Site turned down because of access and visibility were poor. Gilman and Telegraph locations cover this market. We talked to Rayleigh's twice, and their real estate folks were positive on this, but when it came to a vote on their board, they turned it down because they were concerned about Berkeley Bowl. Sprouts turned it down. Again, we talked to them several times and took it all the way up to the real estate committee, but they were concerned about visibility and traffic patterns. Berkeley Bowl passed because they feel both of their locations cover this location. Trader Joe's passed, not interested in locating. Lucky's passed because they need a surface parking lot. Aldi passed, not expanding in Northern California for the foreseeable future, concentrating on new stores in Arizona. Grocery Outlet passed, too big, too expensive. Walmart passed, not opening any neighborhood locations. Draeger's passed, only areas they're considering would be Pack Heights, Cow Hollow Marina, Los Gatos, Saratoga. Nugget passed, not looking to expand in Emeryville. Molly Stone's passed, concentrating on San Francisco. Good Earth, this location doesn't work well for us for distribution, and the site does not project enough sales via our business model. Woodland Market, which is up in Marin, not interested. They're working on remodeling their Kentfield location. Oliver's, this does not fit for their distribution operation. Lazy Acres, not expanding Northern California. Jimbo's, appreciate, but very familiar with the site, but ultimately we're not looking to expand in the Bay Area. Gus's Community Market, too much to take on. Buy Right, working on deals in Oakland for a 6,000-foot space. Village Market, pass, not interested in taking another store. Andy's Local Market, can't find enough employees to work this other store. United Market, not looking to expand. Community Foods Market, working on opening stores in San Pablo. Sac Natural Foods, not interested in the Bay Area. Scotty's Market, not interested in this location. El Cerrito's Natural Grocery Store, not looking to expand. Alameda's Natural Grocery Store, opening a new store in Castro Valley. That fills them up. Brian's Grocery Store, not interested in opening a new store at this time. Piedmont Grocery, operators looking to retire. H Mart, they've only got 2 stores, not looking to expand. Seafood City, working on Canada and Toronto. Ranch 99, working on a location in Fremont. Marina Foods, not looking to expand to the East Bay. Farmer Joe's, pass. And then we've got in addition, Calmart, Bianchi's, Folletti's, Park Plaza Fine Foods, Canyon Market, Marinwood, Bristol Farms, Gelson's, Market of Choice, Lenardi's, Rainbow, and Coogie's. So those are all the folks that we talked to. And we talked to all of these folks more than 2 times. And this is over the course of 20 months. And we still would love to have a grocery store. We think that would be great for the community. It'd be great to help support our tenants in the food hall. But we're also concerned about is keeping the whole public market vibrant, and we're concerned about that void being there, and it means there's not bodies coming to the public market and then bodies not frequenting the other retailers and food purveyors. And so I'm very concerned about if that stays vacant longer, then we're going to have more vacancies with our food purveyors. And I don't want that to happen. We're trying to make this thing go, and I don't want to slide backwards. And if another grocer came along, sure, we'd love to put them in. But for right now, I think we need to move on for all the reasons stated. So that's my presentation for now, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and open up for comments and questions from the commissioners. I'll start with Commissioner Thompson.
Yeah, I have a question about who was the grocer who said it was too big?
Well, there were several, because some of these grocers have smaller size components.
Yep.
Because they want to be, some want to be 5,000 feet, some want to be 6,000 feet, some would be 10 or 12,000 feet. And we never turned any of them down and said you have to be 30,000 feet. As Maru said in her presentation, we looked at the possibility of creating a 5,000-foot market over between Guitar Center and Urban. We talked about the possibility if we could get somebody to take 20,000 feet and then converting the other 10,000 feet in the back to maybe office, we would do that. We also talked to see if we could find a purveyor that would handle both, say, produce, fruits, meat in the food hall itself and take stalls. We couldn't get anybody to do that either.
Okay, yeah, no, I was just curious because I noticed the difference between the 30,000 gross square
Yeah.
feet that you had planned and one purveyor saying it's too big and another saying they're looking for a 6,000 gross square foot size. So I wondered if grocery is just changing.
Well, it is definitely
Yeah.
is changing. Again, as Maru stated, there is a big concern by all grocers about Amazon getting into the space. Amazon is also talking about opening their own grocery stores in addition to Whole Foods. Everyone's concerned about the delivery of foods, and so they've all, going back 2 years ago, talking about taking smaller and smaller space. And then the other problem is that in this environment, people are concerned about, they don't get rewarded for taking a risk in these things, especially when the market's going this way, so nobody's willing to step up and say, I'm going to. And the other thing I should mention is these places were all offered at a discount, in rent. It wasn't the full contract rent. And it was and they still weren't interested.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Donaldson?
I don't have any questions right now.
Commissioner Young?
Well, hi Mark, how you doing? Well, one question that I was kind of interested in was like Community Foods Market, and I know they put a store up on San Pablo, and it's interesting to see that store. It just started, and it's kind of dry as far as like its popularity. Maybe has a little bit of chance to roll forward. So I can kind of see where there's even like a viable population that's over there. Hence, what's going on this side. And I can see the other thing that I'm concerned about is like Amazon's really kind of jumping on all. This is a brand new thing that kind of jumps on everybody. Have you talked to Amazon?
Yeah, we've tried, again, multiple times through multiple channels at Amazon. We've done other deals with them in other areas, tried to get them to come and look, and we've had 3 or 4 tours scheduled, they cancel, and then they say, well, we're not really interested. So we've probably reached out to them, I don't know, at least 10 times.
They're most interesting in Seattle. They did this deal where you don't even carry cash. You just walk in, use a credit card, walk out.
Well, we put them into a project in San Francisco where that's what they do. So we have a relationship with them. They just weren't interested in going to this location in Emeryville.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I have a couple questions. I want to go ahead and address the letter that we received from Commissioner Keller. And there's something in there that I was interested in asking about. There's a quote there that says that your business is receiving a higher rent with the existing lease from New Seasons than you'd be able to get at current market value. Is that true?
Are they paying a higher rent than
Yes.
current market is? Yeah.
Okay, and in your negotiations with the supermarkets that you mentioned, was a market rate rent offered for those businesses?
That's what I just said. We offered it at a discount, so yeah,
Okay.
it was.
Great, thank you. My second question, it pertains to the potential businesses that you may be interested in bringing in outside of grocery stores. Are you able to share any of those potentials with us?
Because we don't have a change in use now, we haven't been actively marketing it, but talking to brokers and just our knowledge of the market, it could be a combination of fitness, it could be entertainment, it could be more food, it could be some combination of that with office.
Okay, those are my questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
All right. At this time, I want to go ahead and open up for public comment. I have one speaker here list, and if anybody else is interested in speaking, please be sure to sign a sheet here to my right. And I'm going to invite Ms. Fran Quittel to speak.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Fran Quittel, I live in Emeryville. I serve on the Budget Advisory Committee. I just have a couple questions so I understand a little bit better. And anyone can answer these questions. questions. I just wonder if there was any, and I understand the Amazon effect really deeply, and its negative effect on small businesses. I'm curious to know if there were any issues about trucks being able to make deliveries to the market. Was there any concern about that? And also, I'd like to know how do most customers get to the public market? And the reason I bring up those two issues is I just want them on the record. Okay? Thank you.
All right. Are there any other speakers that would like to speak on this item? Yeah, it looks like we have Commissioner Keller speaking as a resident.
Good evening, Chair Guerrero and Commissioners. Thank you. As you know from my 4-page letter, I'm adamantly opposed to the changing of the use of the grocery store location. I'm happy to answer any of the questions that you may have regarding my letter. I'm glad that you asked the point about the rate, the rental rate on that. And I just wanted to express that the grocery store in this location is essential to assuring that this neighborhood is a walkable and livable part of our neighborhood. So far, the tremendous success of our new Christie Park and how vibrant the public market is at times is a testament that we're on the right track. Changing the course from what has been planned and approved would be a detriment to the public market, to the Bayfront neighborhood, the North Bayfront neighborhood, and to the city. So I just want to address a couple of things that came up in Maru's presentation. She had mentioned that New Seasons is not opening any more California markets, that they have opened a market in Aptos, and that's been open just several months. So they're not avoiding California, but they're just going, according to the letter we received from them, that they are just focusing in their existing markets. And to the closing of the Emeryville store, I visited that store prior to their closing it, and why they ever built that store in particular is beyond me, because within a mile each direction there were 2 Safeway stores, so they put themselves right in the middle of a big Safeway market. So why they built a market of theirs in that area, I don't know. I'm not surprised that it didn't succeed. And I do just want to bring your attention that when Mr. Steffens had talked about that rent difference was our first meeting on Parcel B when they were proposing the lab buildings. And prior to that lab buildings, what they wanted to do was remove the retail from that building because retail is hard to fill. So I'm concerned that if they use retail in this particular location, which I don't really see it being a good fit, what is he going to come back and ask next? Is he going to say, I have retail here, now I can't support it there? And as the pictures I showed you in the letter I wrote, that whole project is vibrant because of the retail activation that is along the public market side. So if we're putting retail over in this more obscure corner where a location should be that draws traffic, not that needs foot traffic, what's that going to do to the rest of the project? Because site Parcel A and Parcel B is supposed to be all ground for retail. So I think that's a key factor. In the people that he had talked to, I heard of them, we're opening a store here, we're opening a store here, we're opening a store here. So the fact that stores are not opening isn't the fact. I think what we need to do is try to make this attractive so they open stores here instead of Castro Valley or over in Marin. And if, as Commissioner Young had said, if they build out a office in that space and then 5 years the office people leave, I don't think a grocery store is going to come in, forego the money and expense of getting that and putting in a market. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more public comments on this item? All right, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close public session.
Public hearing.
Sorry?
Public hearing.
Closing public hearing. All right, and so at this point, I want to open up for comments from commissioners. I'll begin with Commissioner Young.
There's a lot of obviously a lot of debate going on in this, and I mean, it's been 50 studies. I mean, goes in there, 18 months, 50 studies, going in there, looking at different companies and businesses to try to go and fill that space. I mean, how long? My question is, how long would you go for another 18 months and it's going to be the same sort of thing? And what happens is it actually puts a negative opening. We still may not have a market. The other thing too is that I'm well aware of Community Food Market, which is on San Pablo. They're about 5 blocks from Safeway, and then there's nothing headed south to all the way downtown. I don't know if you guys know where that is, but it's about about just on the other side of the just on the other side of the Emeryville line. What I think is we need to realize is that we have a issue with social media. You know, Amazon's taken over a lot of like what we're doing in a lot of different ways. I mean, we're finding ourselves being forced to change when it's not really comfortable to do it. And it's changing the model for marketing, it's changing the model for advertisers, it's changing the model for television, just everything around us. And one comment I would think that we need to realize is that, I mean, he's got some big names on here, and there's, you know, these are not just ordinary stores, these are stores that have been around time, established, and unless there's someone who's brand new that's not been in the market world, I mean the grocery world, I think it's going to be kind of far-fetched to find somebody for a long time, and I think that's something we need to recognize. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Young. Commissioner, I'm sorry, Donaldson.
Yeah. I really believe that the developers would like to see a grocery store here. Expanding the uses is not going to preclude a grocery store. The sites are going to be built out over a number of years coming up, so if the markets change and opportunities change and we have denser population that arrives, there will be opportunities to do a medium-sized or smaller grocery store, which I think would work really well with the prepared food hall, to have a nice little market hall like up at Rockridge. And I think that those kind of opportunities are something that are not being precluded if we allow the other uses at this point.
Thank you. Commissioner Thompson?
Sure. I think what my concern is really that ground floor activation question. That's something that we've stressed regarding a livable mixed-use environment. And I don't think these uses are necessarily all equal. Like a private office that has a ground floor use is actually quite different than a fitness or a retail use, which has more public activity and activation. That being said, I think there has been a significant amount of effort put into the question of the grocer, and increased flexibility in the situation could potentially be a very good idea. So. Because again, if the priority is on activation and the priority is on used spaces, I think it will be important to create that flexibility.
Thank you. All right. I have a couple questions for Mr. Steffen. This relates back to public comment. Can you speak to any concern that was raised by potential grocers in regard to loading?
None of the grocers expressed any concern about loading.
Okay. And were there any studies that help identify how we expect most customers to get to the location?
We've done a variety of studies, and we have pedestrian counts and people coming in different areas and traffic. Right now most of the volume comes from office users and from the food hall, and we get just we probably get 1,500 a day just for food hall users, and we've got available parking spaces for them as maybe 240. So, or maybe there's other places, so maybe it gets up to maybe 350. So the bulk of the rest are coming on foot. So I think there's a big percentage that are coming on foot, and that was always envisioned when we did the original modeling for how much parking we needed. That this would have a demand more like an urban environment than a suburban environment, because a suburban environment you would have had 4 per 1,000 for the office, and you would have had 8 per 1,000 for the grocery store, and you'd had 8 per 1,000 for the restaurant. So we're parked less for that, and that was all done by a study we had done. We had several studies commissioned by international parking consultants in terms of how much parking we needed. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. I have one more question unrelated to public comment. My question is about the type of business that we potentially could have there. And this may be a question for staff too. Thinking of something that would be in between a retail and grocer, it's CVS or Walgreens. Is that considered a retail store or a grocery store?
Grocery store is a retail store, and so is CVS. So they're all under the large umbrella of retail.
Got it. And Mr. Steffen, is this a company that you've engaged up to this point?
Have we talked to them?
Mhm.
Yeah, we've talked to CVS, we've talked to Walgreens, we've talked to Target,
Mhm.
all of those.
Great, thank you. Those are all my questions for now. The rest really.
Just one last thing I want to say is my other concern is if you decide, take another year to check this out, the negative is that space has been vacant almost for 20 months, and it just doesn't show well for the rest of the project. You've got this big empty space, and I think it hurts us, one, from going forward to find other tenants for other parts of the project, and it just doesn't cast a good shadow on the success of the overall project. So that's the other element that concerns me. So thank you.
Thank you.
I actually have one other question. Where does entertainment fall in this categorization? Is it retail? Is it office? What is it?
It's a separate use category that is
Okay.
being, yeah.
And I just wondered, because in your language you had mentioned entertainment, but it would not be one of these uses?
No.
Okay, just checking.
So for clarification, if a bowling alley was considered for this space, that would be considered entertainment.
It would be considered indoor recreation.
Got it. And that's not included in the four.
It is
That
included.
would be
Got it.
included.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Okay. So my comments here, I do believe that the applicant has shown that they've made a big effort to fill the space with a grocery store and fulfill that commitment. I do see that times are changing, and in retail grocery stores, the viability is questionable. Whether we shift online, I think that's to be found. I don't know that I'll go grocery shopping online. That said, I do live close to the space and would love to see it activated, and I don't want to see it empty for another year. And so I would support us moving forward with this because I feel it does conform to the PDP, and I want to see it alive. I think about the bar that opened at the public market and how that really revived the space. Right? I feel like this space that's in question, it has potential to do the same thing. And so I wouldn't want to continue to search for a grocery store when you've made it evident that you've really made it an effort to get a grocery store in that space. That said, this is an action item, and I'm looking for a motion if anybody would like to move forward with that.
Well, I just had a question about the motion, and because I'm very much in support of the fitness and recreation option and the retail option as an expansion of that, but I'm less convinced about the office and the research and development. Is there a way to split those or not?
Well, you can certainly make a motion with modified conditions. The commission often modifies conditions of approval when you approve an application, and you could, let's see, on the first or second page of the conditions of approval is listed the additional uses that the applicant has requested. You could delete office and research and development if you wanted to do that.
Okay, I mean, so I would make a motion to accept the fitness and recreation use and the retail use without reservation, to expand the uses for those two.
Do I have a second?
Okay, you don't have to.
All right. See no second. Do we have a motion to approve this as written?
I would make a motion to approve this as written.
Do we have a second?
I would second that. I think it's important to have the flexibility. I think the space needs to be filled, and I do think there are going to be more coming online. I'd actually wonder about adding entertainment to it. But
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, I live really close to there as well. I mean, I go by that place all the time. I mean, that's where I, go to the city and take my carpool over or whatever. And, I mean, I was, more than anybody, I would have loved to be able to go in there and grab a sandwich and leave. I mean, for a year and, year and a half. And, but I think it's with that vacant lot that we're still trying to figure out to do with next to it, and there's just a couple other projects that we really need to really look at. I think we could have some trust that something nice could go in there and be usable and not to close it off to anything, especially the way it's written up.
Thank you. So we have a motion on the floor and a second.
I request some clarification.
Mhm.
Was the motion to add entertainment to the list?
Ooh.
Well, what
Or-
do the other commissioners straw poll?
Commissioner Thompson?
Again, activation's my issue, so that I would support that, but I'm still have reservations about the others.
Would it be too late to have Mr. Steffen come up to ask him a question?
No.
Mr. Steffen, would you please come up for a second, please? Do you have a person in this kind of what is it, research and development area that's interested in this space? Or have you had, who has been interested in this space?
We've not talked to anyone from that point of view because we haven't had the change of use. We've been talking for the parcel B that we've, been, thanks to our friends that have appealed us twice, we've been held up on that, and we've had folks that are interested in that project, but we've not talked to anybody about office or life science or
any
anything.
life- yeah, like anything like
B.
that.
And the other thing to keep in mind too is that we might find it's a 30,000 foot box. We might find a use that fits 20, but then what do we do with the other, 10? And that's why it might be nice to be able to put in another use to fill up that space that maybe a certain other retailer wouldn't take if it's off, say, the side facing north or something like that.
Well, I think as long as, we don't have lab rats back there, I think we might be okay.
We won't have any rats back there.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
All right.
Our desire, you have to understand, we're as invested in this as anybody
I'm
here.
sure.
Because our lifeblood is trying to make this thing work and get in the right mix. I think you can appreciate that we spent a lot of time to get the right tenants in the food hall, not just putting in any big chain. We've really worked hard to get the right mix, and we'll continue to do so because it all needs to work together.
Thank you.
Chair
Thanks.
Guerrero?
Yes.
Can I suggest you ask Mr. Steffen how he feels about adding entertainment to the list?
Yes. Mr. Steffen, can you
Fine.
comment on that?
I'm okay with that.
Great.
Oh, great.
Thanks.
I would make an emotion that would add entertainment to the way it's been written.
We have a motion on the floor,
On the floor?
and we want
I
to
would
clarify.
But the mover and the seconder of the motion can amend their motion.
Yes.
Oh, got
I
it.
would amend it to include entertainment.
All right. Motion is amended to include entertainment. Do you second that?
I would second that.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Okay. So that said, are there any more comments or deliberation that you'd like to have before we move forward with the vote?
All right.
Do you need any more clarification, Charlie?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. I think we're ready for a roll call vote, please.
All right, let's see. Commissioner Barrera has an excused absence. Commissioner Donaldson?
Aye.
Commissioner Keller is recused. Commissioner Young?
Aye.
Vice Chair Thompson?
I wanted to know what the passage threshold is.
3.
Okay.
Because there are 4 commissioners present and voting, it needs to be a majority of that.
Okay. Because I want to continue expressing my reservations about the other uses, and I think in terms of it just giving the right to all of the uses, you are giving the right to all the uses. It's not a comment on what they might do, but it is a comment on the fact that that is a ground floor retail setting, and it should be more sensitive to activation.
Commissioner Thompson, is that a yay or nay?
That's a nay.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead.
Commissioner Guerrero?
Yes.
Chair Guerrero.
You got it.
Yes, sorry.
Yay.
All right, 3 ayes, 1 no. The motion is approved. The application is approved, I should say. This decision is appealable to the City Council within 15 days.
Thank you, Charlie. All right. So we're going to invite Commissioner Keller to join us again here. We're moving on to item 7.2. This is a temporary emergency family shelter item. And Navarre, I think you have a presentation for us. Great.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, Commission. Let's take a moment to get set up here. All right, good evening. So this is about the proposal for a temporary emergency family shelter at 4300 San Pablo Avenue, which is shown here on the screen, the location highlighted in red on the northeast corner of 43rd Street and San Pablo Avenue. And here are some street shots of that location. So for project overview, this is to modify the existing portables at 4300 San Pablo to provide office space for by-appointment homeless services, provide temporary emergency shelter for families, and it's anticipated to operate for 18 to 24 months while the City of Oakland works to identify and develop a permanent facility for the region, or the area rather. And the conditions of approval for this project require a permanent extension for operations longer than 2 years. So the office space for the by-appointment homeless services will have a family front door operating it, which connects homeless families to community resources. The families are screened by phone first, and families are matched to resources as they're available. And all families that propose shelter are assigned through FFD. And it will have standard office hours operating during the day. The temporary emergency shelter for families would be operated by the applicant, East Oakland Community Project, or EOCP. The number of beds would need to be a little bit flexible because it would be dependent on the number of members of each family who are there. So it would be targeting 20 to 25 families, but the beds count would be a little bit flexible. It would only be serving the pre-screened families, as I mentioned before, and families are considered to be one or more adults with at least one child under the age of 18, with a targeted length of stay of 4 to 6 months, depending on circumstances. The shelter would operate 24 hours a day, so this is not a drop-in facility. Once the family is assigned, it's their home. No cooking is on site, meals are delivered daily, and there's on-site support services for residents as well. So this is the site plan for the former recreation center at the site. The entrance is to the right of the screen, the rear of the property is to the left of the screen. And zooming in out a little bit to see the whole thing a little bit better, this is the proposed shelter floor plan. The office area is in the front towards 43rd Street. The common areas of the shelter are in green here, so a shelter cannot be accommodated inside the existing building, so it would be outside adjacent to the ramp here and be enclosed showers. Then there's bathrooms along the edges and laundry, and the center rooms here are for common areas, so that would be for eating, socializing, play area for children. And then the shelter bedrooms are on both sides, but primarily along the San Pablo Avenue side. And so that's what it looks like all together, the full color spectrum. So for site details, the existing portables are to be reused. The showers, as I just mentioned, cannot be incorporated into the existing buildings, so a trailer will be provided. It is a fixed permanent feature of the shelter. It won't be coming and going. For loading, the meal delivery and laundry services for bedding and towels will take place on the existing loading zone on 43rd Street. And discard, so that's your trash, compost, and recycling, and will continue to be stored behind the security fence on the east side of the building. No parking is available on site. So here is the site plan. As I just mentioned, the loading on 43rd, discards to the east side, and showers to the back. So for background on this project, the application was submitted on June 3rd. There was a community meeting on July 11th, and this came for a study session here to the Planning Commission on July 23rd. At the July 11th community meeting, about 20 neighbors showed up, and the questions primarily focused on shelter operations and potential neighborhood impacts. Concerns were raised about parking, and the neighbors provided suggestions of not parking on the local adjacent streets, so 43rd Street, that's a typo, Essex and Salem Streets were mentioned in that meeting. And also to see if nearby businesses such as CVS or Bank of America would be willing to go into an agreement to accommodate some parking. Concerns were also raised from the adjacent neighbors about noise from the existing AC units, which are all located on the east side of the building, close to where you saw the discards a few moments ago. And appreciation was also expressed to the applicant for their work, as this is a needed service and location in the community. So July 25th Planning Commission study session, 4 neighbors spoke during the public comment for that, and comments and concerns were very consistent with those made at the July 11th community meeting. An additional street, 41st Street, was added to the list of streets that people requested that residents, employees, and clients not park on because those are very impacted from the senior center that's around the corner. And the commissioners and neighbors expressed appreciation again towards the applicant and the needs for an emergency family shelter in the community. The commission directed follow-up in a couple of areas that were expressed as concerns during that meeting. So one was contact information. If there are problems, who can neighbors or who people in the community contact if there's any issues? So contact information for both the facility operator and city staff is to be posted on site, and this is in the conditions of approval for the project. For on-street parking, it's in the conditions of approval to direct parking away from 43rd Street, Essex, Salem, and 41st Streets, and to direct parking towards Park Avenue, where there was a parking study done showing that there would be adequate space to address the parking needs of this facility. And this is also in the conditions of approval. For off-street parking, the applicant is looking into the feasibility of obtaining parking agreements with nearby commercial property owners. And it's also in the conditions of approval that they will look into it and have a good faith effort, but it's not a requirement as we can't force nearby property owners to share their resources. And as for the noise, staff and the applicant assess the AC units on site and assess that the next step should be maintenance to reduce humming and reducing the need overall to run the AC units by installing roof fans in the central rooms. The AC units that have been problematic for noise don't only cool the building, they also push air through it. So by installing the roof fans, it'll help reduce the need for running those units. And then if the AC units do need to be run and it's still causing a problem, then there can be noise baffling panels mounted if necessary. So it's kind of a stage thing depending on what the needs are moving forward. We won't know exactly until things start working in that space. And so that is also addressed in the conditions of approval. So general plan and zoning. This is in a mixed-use residential zone. It's a transit hub overlay, neighborhood retail overlay, and pedestrian priority zone. The project is consistent with setbacks. There's no open space requirement. There is a rear yard available for play. Landscaping is, this is not subject to landscaping requirements, and the design review is required for some minor exterior changes, which would be the modification to some windows for egress, and also the shower trailer, which we mentioned a few moments ago. For zoning, the floor area ratio is well under the base FAR. There's no change in the building height. This is not considered a residential use, so it's not subject to residential density. It's considered a commercial and institutional use type. There's no development bonuses, and we'll talk a little bit more about that parking in a moment. The emergency shelter parking requirement is TBD. So as I mentioned, we assessed that there should be about 14 spaces that are needed, and there was a study done showing that there is that amount of parking spaces available on Park Avenue on a regular basis. So the conditions of approval were developed in response to the community meetings I just mentioned a few moments ago, directing people away from the local streets and over to Park Avenue. So for the use classification, emergency shelter is housing with minimal supportive services for homeless, and a conditional use permit is required for this use. So conditional use permit findings are that the proposed use is consistent with the general plan, that the characteristics and design of the proposed use are compatible with the neighborhood, that the proposed use is compatible with utilities and emergency response systems, and that the proposed use contributes to the general well-being of the community and complies with the planning regulations. The parking below the minimum findings are the adequate measures will be put in place to reduce parking demand. The applicant has assessed that about a quarter of their employees will probably be taking transit to the location, and the majority of their clients and residents will not be driving. So the 14 parking spaces is probably an overestimate of the actual demand that will occur. But nonetheless, that we've directed the parking away from those adjacent streets to address that, and that the reduction or elimination of the parking spaces will not result in parking impacts to the adjacent uses, and so we've discussed how that will be approached. So major design review findings are that the design of the project is consistent with the general plan, and that it conforms to the Emeryville design guidelines, and that it's of a high design quality that is compatible with the surrounding area, and it's reusing an existing building, and there'll be on-site maintenance, which hasn't been happening for the past few years as actively as it will be moving forward with regular occupant. So for exceptions to standards, there's 10 requirements, sorry, let me try that again. For the emergency shelter, there's 10 requirements, and the applicant is requesting an exception to standards for 4 of those. Those are for the number of beds, the the ordinance says that the emergency shelter may have up to 60 beds. The applicant is asking for flexibility because of the families. For a waiting area is a requirement, and because it's not a drop-in facility, a waiting area isn't needed, and that would be taken away from area that could be used to serve families as either common space or as living areas. Outdoor activities are restricted and are standards for between 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And as this is a family shelter, we want to make sure that the kids can play outside after 6 p.m. and that people can access showers outside of those hours as well. And that their on-site staffing will be slightly different than what's in the regulations because the needs for a family shelter with regular occupants is different than a drop-in shelter. So the findings for exceptions or standards is that the proposal for which the exception is sought is consistent with the general plan, that strict compliance with the planning regulations would preclude an effective design solution, that the proposal for which the exception is sought would fulfill the basic intent of the applicable regulations, and the proposal for the exception would comply with the applicable design review criteria, which we reviewed a few moments ago, and that the proposal for which the exception is sought would be compatible with and would not adversely affect the surrounding area, which we also reviewed in a different context a few moments ago. So staff reviewed this at the June DCC meeting and again at August meeting. The applicant has been very responsive to staff comments and feedback, and there have been no comments or concerns from staff, just support for the project. This evening, we recommend approval for the project. The applicant is here for questions. The applicant team is available. They don't have a presentation for you tonight, but are available for you.
Great, thank you, Navar. While you're here, we can open it up for questions for Navar. Commissioner Keller? No? All right, see no questions?
I have one. Do you know how many people were typically in there when it was a rec center? How many kids and staff?
I don't know off the top of my head other than a lot more than this.
Oh, yeah.
And
I mean, they had multiple classes going on at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Dozens of people.
I'm told it was about 120.
Thank you, Charlie.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, and how is the parking situation going to be monitored or enforced? Do you have any thoughts on that?
So the applicant, the operators of the shelter will be directing everyone, their employees, their clients, their, the residents, on what appropriate parking is and basically how to be good neighbors in this situation. And part of the whole thing about posting contact information is if there is a problem, they can contact staff, they can contact the facilities, and we'll address the problem. Again, the estimated parking demand is probably an overestimate also. Does that address your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
It does. I have one more. There is in the conditions of approval things about the public art program, and it looks like they fall below the requirement of the public art program.
Yeah, that was just in
Boilerplate.
case it ends up being higher. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh yes, thank you for mentioning that. Actually, on the dais there was the preliminary fee calculation form,
Right.
and we did not have that calculated at the time.
Okay.
So it was included in the conditions of approval just in case. But I agree with you; it'll probably not be triggered as part of this project.
Commissioner Keller?
I just wanted to tag on to Commissioner Dottleson's work. I'm considering, and when we come to our discussion about the question on parking, I want to talk to the commission about a possibility of making a condition of approval that the residents, the temporary residents, register their car with the office and display some form of placard or permit, so we know that that's where the car is. So we'll get into that more in our conversation.
Do you have a question?
No,
Okay,
I just wanted to answer her question more or less.
I have
got
a
it.
question.
We have a question from Commissioner Thompson.
Just a question about the exceptions. It's very clear that they're asking for those 4 exceptions. What happens what's the recourse if later, if it passes and they're granted and they move forward, what happens if the open late outdoors till 8 is a problem? What happens if the number of residential counselors is a problem? What's the difference between the standards versus versus the, the granting of the exceptions? And how do you, what's the recourse in terms of dealing with anything that comes out of that?
I'm going to answer this in one way, but Charlie might want to answer it in a different way, or you might feel that I'm not addressing this. But we're trying to address the needs of this facility, and being that it operates very differently from what was foreseen to be included in this. It's more about being reasonable about what the expectations are for this particular facility. And my anticipation would be if there was an issue with people being outside later than 6 o'clock, it would be noise related probably, right? So that would be something that would need to be addressed for that reason, right? So it's hard to give a specific answer, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess specifically regarding the noise ordinance, I mean, the noise ordinance would cover it at that point, right? And there are quiet hours associated with Emeryville. Is that true?
Yeah. I would also say that, like most things are, in terms of complaints or compliance with conditions, we generally operate on a complaint basis. So we're not going to be out there monitoring these folks all the time. But if we do get a complaint from a neighbor, and it appears there might be a violation of the whatever conditions of approval the commission imposes, we would contact the applicant and discuss it with them. And one of the conditions, of course, is to require that they display contact information, both for the operator and for the city. And so the neighbors will have plenty of phone numbers to call. And, hopefully we can get all the affected parties together and work it out.
Okay. No, I just wanted clarification on that. Thanks.
All right, do we have any more questions for staff from the commission? Commissioner Keller?
I just want to take on, so Charlie, if we find that we approve that they only need one person at night, or Navarre, that we find that is not being sufficient and that we feel that there need to be two people, the conditions clearly states that they only have to have one. What is our mechanism for in saying that, okay, we're finding that one person monitoring this place at night isn't enough, we'd like you to have two?
If I may, I think the question is what is the conduct that is creating the issue? So for example, if it's noise related, then we figure out how to address that. We wouldn't necessarily simply add an additional person. So you have to first identify what the impact is, and then you figure out how to resolve that impact.
Okay. All right. Do you have something to add?
Yeah, I wanted to add something real quickly about the parking. Is something that came up in both the community meeting and the planning commission meeting last time, was that there's a lot of concern. A lot of the concerns about parking are not so much based necessarily on the proposed use, but because of the previous use of the recreation center, that the parking impacts from that were so bad, largely because they were really peak impact times of like high levels of drop off, high levels of pickups all at one time, which caused a lot of congestion at certain parts of the day and had a lot of spillover and negative effects. And that in combination with the senior center was very problematic. And that this use would be very different from that. It will not have these peak times like the previous use. So while there is parking, it's not the same type of parking.
Thank you. All right. Charlie, did you have something to add there?
Well, I just wanted to clarify in response to Commissioner Keller's question about the staffing overnight. The conditions actually are for 2. So, I mean, maybe they need 3. Maybe in your opinion, or in, as it turns out, you might think they need 3, but the condition does say for 2.
Thank you, Charlie. Okay. I want to go ahead and invite the applicant to come up and address us if you like. Oh.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to say that I did have the opportunity to talk to representatives of the B of A and of CVS, and I was actually very encouraged by B of A. I talked about using placards, and the facilities manager said, yeah, that would really work given the size of the lot. She talked about the L shape of the lot and how it would work, and I was very encouraged by that. CVS was less encouraging, but it's okay. she has moved it up her management line, and I'm encouraged by that. I think that we might be able to come to a reasonable agreement that will work for our employees and residents and for the community. I'm hopeful.
Thank you. Want to open up for questions from the commission to the applicant? All right, seeing none.
I do have one. So are the people that you're serving, are they typically at the shelter more often in the daytime or at nighttime? I mean, are there more people there, one or the other?
Nighttime.
Yes, so
Yes,
there's
because
a lot more street parking on Park Street at nighttime, so.
yeah, and because during the day they are they have case managers working with them, you know, to do medical, housing, and employment search. So it's a busy schedule, and of course they all have children, so their children are in school and need to be, you know, guided, shepherded, chauffeured. So however that works.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so at this time I want to go ahead and open up a public hearing for this item. I don't have any speaker cards here, but if there's anybody who would like to address the commission, this is your chance. All right, seeing none, I'm closing. Oh, we have one speaker. You're welcome to come. Would you like to come up and speak to the commission and do a public comment?
Inviting comments, right?
Yes, sir.
Would you like to just use my microphone instead?
Ah, there we go. Thank you.
No, I'll come to the podium. Thank you. Hi, my name is Bob Connell. I live at the Emeryville Senior Apartments that's right next door to the project site. There's a 6-foot wood fence that my apartment on the second floor overlooks the project site, the playground and where the showers are going to be, etc. So I'm not going to take up a lot of your time, hopefully. And I'm kind of winging it because I've read, well, first of all, about 3 weeks ago, Navarre Oaks was very generous with her time in answering my questions and talking about the proposed project. So, but since reading the paperwork and thinking about the impacts, the visitors, I know that the people, that it's going to be children and homeless, probably mothers, I guess, fathers, whatever, uncles, aunts. But aside from, so that population will be pretty much contained within the building. But I'm concerned about visitors who would not be allowed on the property. So my concerns are mostly social, I guess. If, you know, can they address how people get homeless and what their relative and social acquaintances have in terms of the people that are not admitted to the facility may show up males and what they may drop on the street, etc. My concern is looking down on the property and then going every day Safeway. So I'm on the street, passing that all the time, and I don't know what impact visitors who would maybe loitering on the street, etc., would have that I would have to pass, whether it be agitated or, you know, have drugs on them or whatever. You know, I can think of the worst case scenarios. I'm for the children getting education, etc. Homelessness is devastating for a child's education.
Thank you, sir. That's your time. Do you have just want to finish your sentence there? Or?
I'll just mention it was pure coincidence. KQED had a program on homeless children and immigrant children, and these children are going to be cycled out every 2 months or 4 months or whatever. That has an impact on them in terms of, well, on a number of different levels. There's a federal law.
Thank you. Your time is up, sir. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll just mention there's a federal law regarding homeless children and regarding immigrant children's education, and it was passed back in the 70s to set a standard for children's education with immigrant families coming and picking fruit and et cetera, and moving from state to state. So I'll end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Bob, if you wouldn't mind, can you sign in to the speaker sheet? I believe that would be located just right by Andrea here.
Very good.
To your left. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And it looks like we have one more public comment from Ms. Frankenthal.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This is really interesting, and I just have a couple of clarifying questions, and maybe to Navar. The funding for converting, I'll just say what they are. The funding for converting the building. The second thing is, does the city of Emeryville have any responsibility to the residents beyond housing? I would presume the children would be going to school in our schools and maybe in our preschool, or where would and anything else that we as a city might be doing. And then the third thing is it's sort of compassionate use. What if the family doesn't have a place to go after 4 or 6 months? Those are my three.
Thank you. Navar, would you like to answer that?
I'll briefly answer in terms of school. My understanding from the applicant is that, you want to have as much continuity as possible. So wherever the children are in school, ideally they'll be able to continue whatever their home school is. But yeah, some people might be going to ECCL or other local schools around here. As for your other questions, I think it'd probably be best for the applicant to discuss those aspects of operations and their population.
Before we continue, I just want to open up for any more comments before I close the public hearing. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and invite the applicant to answer the question if you'd like.
I forgot one of the questions. I remember the last one about. I might need help in answering that question. Lara might want to answer that question. I'll answer the last question while she's coming up. Sometimes people don't find housing in 4 to 6 months, but that's why we have 2 case managers there working with them. We have an excellent track record in finding housing for people. Sometimes it's quite far away, as you can imagine, given where we live, but it will be a focus. We have a funding to find housing for people quickly. And we are taking a few more chances at using what we call rapid rehousing funds. But our major goal is to get people sustainably housed in places that they can afford after our aftercare period. So all I can say is that we're working diligently at it, and we want people to find housing as quickly as possible so that they and their families can be stabilized.
And I just wanted to that point, there was a statistic in the previous presentation in our study session. Didn't you say that you had a 96%? 96%? Okay.
No, it's the way my mind works. It's a 4% recidivism rate, which means 96% of the people who get housed stay housed.
Okay.
And that's really important. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just real quick, so what was the possible answer for people who get turned away? There was a gentleman brought up that idea. So if someone went there and would be turned away, do they just get left on the sidewalk? And pointed it.
Well, it doesn't really happen. I'll just tell you how it happens in as short a period of time as possible. The family front door, the folks who will be occupying the front of the building, they make an assessment, and then according to what resources we have at that shelter, should it be approved, and the other spaces in Berkeley, Oakland, San Leandro, and Alameda, it's what's available. So it matches the family's need, or in some cases, if housing is available immediately. So people who come there get assessed, and then they wait to hear from us as to what they've been able to be matched to in terms of housing, shelter, transitional housing. Those are the possibilities. So some people are, if you look at it that way, turned away, but it's just a question of where we're at given the number of families who are homeless. The turning away process doesn't happen at the family front door. It happens usually in conversations about what we were able to find from you, and those are usually phone conversations, or we send people out to let those people know.
So if they're there, it's because
they've been assigned there.
Assigned there.
They've been, or as we say, matched there. Yeah. So if they're there, they're supposed to be there.
They're supposed to be there.
Great. We have a comment from Navarre.
I just wanted to clarify that in the presentation when I mentioned 4 to 6 months, that's not a condition of approval. It's not a requirement that the city's imposing in any way. That was an estimated timeline of the general time that people might be spending there. But the city's not saying 6 months. That's not what's happening.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify that.
That wouldn't be in the best interest of the families, and I'm very thankful that the city saw that. Anything else?
Yes, we have a couple comments here from the commissioners.
Sure.
Commissioner
Well, it was
Thompson?
actually just the question to address the first question about the visitor component.
Right. So in our current transitional housing facilities and shelter facilities, we don't really allow visitations because each site has its structure. Yes, people sometimes connect with their families, especially on the weekends, and there's dropping off and that sort of stuff, but there's not visitations. People don't come in, they don't hang out outside to see people. It just doesn't work. Some people think there should be visitations, but we don't do that. The only people who come to visit are providers of services or housing. So those are the people who come to visit. Now, I think that is how we operate right now. We haven't had much of a problem with that. I can't speak omnisciently into the future, but that's not how we operate.
Thank you. All right. And we had one more question. I think that you're going to answer there. Hello.
Hi, Laura Tannenbaum from the City of Oakland. The question was about construction costs. So the City of Oakland will be, through a grant to EOCP, covering all of the construction modification costs as well as any of the operating costs and services costs for the shelter. I also want to note that a lot of our construction costs, both the planning and some of the actual work, is being provided pro bono. So we're working with Mike Piatek Architects and the Oakland Builders Alliance, and we have Jim Moore here from the Oakland Builders Alliance. So we're very grateful for all of the pro bono work that's happening in that as well.
Thank you for clarifying that. All right. So we started deliberation a bit, but Commissioner Young, would you have anything else to add here?
No, I'm perfectly set.
Okay. Commissioner Donaldson?
I think it is a really positive thing if our city can provide housing for families that need it, and I'm all for it.
Thank you. Commissioner Thompson?
Yeah, I think I'm in really strong support of this location, and I'm really excited that Emeryville can host this. It's great to see Emeryville and Oakland working together to try and address what is a regional issue. It's great to see people providing pro bono work as well, and so it's wonderful to see that level of community support for this project.
Commissioner Keller?
I would echo the sentiments of the commission. I'm really, really proud that our city, as small as it is, can provide this type of shelter and this type of use, especially for a very low use or no use facility that was just going to sit there until we find a developer for that property. So 100% behind it. Homelessness is just a wretched thing that is just getting worse and worse. And I'm just glad that we are at least, I mean, I living or working in downtown Berkeley, I see homelessness day to day. And thankfully, I don't see a lot of children, and I don't know why, but I'm thankful that there's not that many, but I think this is great. But the one thing, and I think it's simple and it sounds like we're addressing, but I think the thing that would elate people's minds and would be very cost nil is just that when a applicant fills out their packet, that they have a slip of paper that identifies their car, their make, their model, the color, the license plate, and that we make some kind of, it could just be a laminated piece of paper with your logo, your acronym for your name, and a phone number, and that they display that on the dashboard when they are parked in the area, and that we notify the Emeryville police, this particular placard that you see belongs to these cars. And that way, when you see those cars parked where they don't belong, you can address that person directly and not have to guess what it is. So I would like to make that a condition of approval, just because I think it clarifies the need and what can be done. I think it is a no-cost thing that we could do that would really help the residents in the area know that we're making a very good faith effort to do that.
If I may address the commission, Chair Guerrero, I believe there's some privacy concerns about having the vehicle being identified with the shelter. There may be some occupants that are trying to keep their location undisclosed from other people. I think the shelter tracking the vehicles is one thing, but then requiring it to be displayed publicly on the vehicle would be a different matter, and you may wish to engage the applicant if you are going to impose any conditions about identifying the vehicles of the occupants.
Thank you.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that having a display on the vehicle could be a problem for someone who's escaping a violent environment or something like that. So I think if they just register it with the office and they have that information in their folders, do you guys have? Okay. So would that be okay with the commission?
To clarify, are you wanting to include the condition that the cars are all registered?
With the office, but not identified.
Yes, and I believe that's part of the conditions of approval. No?
No.
Okay, so we want to add that in there.
I think that might be part of their standard operating procedure, however.
I see.
Yeah, I think it's handled.
Yeah. If it is, then if it is a standard operating procedure that you guys adhere to, I don't have a problem just leaving it as that.
Great. Okay. And I wholeheartedly agree with the comments that the commissioners have made already. I am in favor of this moving forward, and I'm ready to vote.
The only thing I did want to acknowledge the applicant for following up around the parking, because it wasn't included in our study packet, so it was wonderful that you were able to say that there had been some movement on that and you had the chance to contact people.
I also want to recognize their long track record of doing this, managing it well and managing these services.
And I just want to say, proud of you guys doing this in Emeryville. It's really nice. It's a great thing to do. And it is like Commissioner Keller has stated, it's a wretched thing to have homelessness laying around here. And I think it's lovely to have something that, you know, a city this size. It's great. It's a nice thing. I'm very proud of that.
All right.
Yeah, I would move approval.
And I would second.
Thank you. We have a motion moved by Commissioner Donaldson, seconded by Commissioner Keller.
On the motion, Commissioner Barrera has an excused absence. Commissioner Donaldson?
Aye.
Commissioner Keller?
Aye.
Commissioner Young?
Aye.
Vice Chair Thompson?
Aye.
And Chair Guerrero.
Aye.
5 ayes, the application is approved. This decision may be appealed to the City Council within 15 days.
Thank you, Charlie. All right, we're moving forward with study session. This is item 8.1, 5850 Shell Mound Project. I'd like to invite up our city staff to present.
Good evening, evening again. This is a study session for 5850 Shell Mound Way Mixed Use Project. It is actually a third study session. I will talk about that in a minute. We are talking about an existing site which is developed with a building, 61,000 square foot building, and it sits on almost an acre and a half piece of parcel. Bounded by Shell Mound Way and Christie Avenue. And this is the existing building. It was built in 1979 as an office building. The key thing to note on this parcel is that the general plan shows the Shell Mound Way moving 250 feet north of its existing configuration. So any development on this parcel would require a general plan amendment to keep Shell Mound Way in its existing configuration, and therefore this general plan amendment is also part of this project, which is a residential, mixed-use residential project. So in terms of background, the first study session was held at the Planning Commission in September of 2017. The issue of general plan amendment had come and considered by the Commission in January of 2018. The Commission recommended approval of this general plan amendment, which would keep Shell Mound Way in its existing configuration. It then went to the council for approval, as all general plan amendments need to, in March of 2018, and the council continued the item in order to include a east-west bicycle and pedestrian path running along the northern side of this site as part of that general plan amendment. The Commission also had a second study session in June of 2018, and now the Commission is looking at the third study session. So what we are looking at is that the project has not changed much from the last time that the Commission saw this about a year ago. The project mix is pretty much very similar. It's 244 rental units. There is a retail, office, commercial space of 7,000 square feet along Shell Mound Way. In addition to that, there is a community gallery as well as a community plaza area. The lobby is at the intersection of Christie and Shell Mound. In addition to that, the ground floor accommodates one level of parking, and it is accommodated with parking lifts. The entrance to the parking space will occur off Christie Avenue, as indicated here. In addition, you also have a bike storage area along Christie, as well as a bike shop along Christie. And of course, the applicant has included a 10-foot setback, which will accommodate the bicycle and pedestrian path that I'd mentioned. It is a double-loaded corridor type building. Second to fifth floors are pretty similar. There is a courtyard of approximately 16,000 square feet, which daylights onto Shell Mound Way. These are 6th and 7th floors, and this is the top floor. This sort of building sections will give you an idea of how the building is designed. As you can see, the parking lifts will require a little bit of undergrounding in order to accommodate the the 3 levels of parking stacks that they are proposing, and then you have levels of residential on top with the courtyard. The height of the building is 85 feet at this level. This is the elevation facing Shell Mound Way, the south elevation. You can see it's essentially brick is used with plaster at the bottom, and that is the only major design change from the last time, where the ground level was also brick. And I will show you the difference between the two further down. And you're looking at the elevation from Christie Avenue. This is where the garage entry would be. This is the view, the northern elevation, the view from the bicycle pedestrian avenue here. And this is the east elevation that kind of is adjacent to the parking, surface parking lot. They do have a landscape plan. They will be adding street trees along Christie and Shell Mound. And then they have the courtyard landscaping plan that includes a variety of seating areas in terms of benches, chairs, and tables. There is a fire pit and grilling facilities, as well as there's a bocce ball court, and there is another sitting arbor area along this fronting Shell Mound Way. So this is the current rendering of the proposal in front of you. The last time you saw this, it looked like this. Like I mentioned, it is the base, which was also brick, which is now been converted to plaster. So this is the proposed, the current rendering along Shell Mound Way. And this was what was shown last time at the second study session. This is the view of the courtyard, and that has not really changed much other than obviously the base. So in terms of conformity to the general plan, like I mentioned, this project does include a general plan amendment to modify the location of Shell Mound Way that is consistent with its existing configuration, and it adds an east-west pedestrian and bicycle path in the approximate location actually of where the general plan currently shows the relocated Shell Mound Way. The applicant has offered 10 feet along the northern property line dedicated for this path, and it is anticipated that an additional 10 feet will be added to the future from the adjacent city-owned parcel to allow construction of a standard 20-foot bicycle and pedestrian path. This, in terms of planning regulations, this is in an MUR or mixed use with residential zone, base zone. There are overlay zones of transit hub as well as pedestrian priority. The use classifications here are multi-unit residential, which is allowed by right, as well as retail and office, which requires a use permit. Since this parcel size is over almost about an acre and a half, a mix of uses is required for any development on this parcel. In terms of residential density, the base density is 85 units per acre, and a bonus density is 170 units. They are proposing a density of 169 units, which means that the project will require 99 bonus points. As far as FAR is concerned, or the floor area ratio, the base is 3 and bonus is 6. They are proposing 4.6. So the project requires 53 bonus points for FAR. In terms of height, the base height is 75 and the bonus height is basically unlimited. And they are proposing 85 feet, so the bonus points for height is 40 points. As you know, when different categories require bonus points, the one that is the highest is one that applies, so the project is going to need 99 bonus points. So half of which will come from a provision of affordable units. So the total number of affordable units that this project will provide is 41. 9 at very low income levels, 14 at low income, and 18 at moderate income. Applicant has not quite yet identified how they will obtain the remaining bonus points, but in the past study sessions, the suggestions by the Commission were made regarding having a community gallery or associated community open space that may qualify for bonus points. I would like to note that the provision of the bike pedestrian path that they are providing 10 feet of it would not count towards community benefits and would not be eligible for bonus points, because if the GP, the general plan amendment, is ultimately approved by the council, this would become a normal requirement. So that 10-foot setback for bike and pedestrian path does not qualify for bonus points. In terms of unit mix and family-friendly design, the requirement, as you know, 50% of the units need to be 2 and 3 bedroom, of which 15 needs to be 3-bedroom units, and only 10 can be studios. And the proposal does conform to our requirement and meets the unit mix. At this time, in terms of the family-friendly floor plans, the plans at this point are a little preliminary for evaluation, so we expect these to be further developed and to ensure that they meet our family-friendly guidelines, design guidelines. In terms of vehicle parking, as I mentioned, this is on a transit hub overlay, which reduces all parking by half. So all the calculations are kind of outlined in the staff report. So the requirement is 107 to 176. What they're proposing is 267. So it does need a use permit to allow more parking. In order to approve the use permit, the commission needs to make the following findings: that the additional parking is required to meet the anticipated demand, and that the provision of more parking will not adversely affect transit, bicycle, or pedestrian access to the site and will not result in an overdependence on cars. In terms of bicycle parking, the requirements is 12 short-term and 244 long-term for the residents. And for the commercial uses, it calculates to 1 to 3 short-term and 1 to 3 long-term spaces. The plans do show long-term parking for residents. However, they do need to provide short-term parking for the guests of the residents, as well as short-term and long-term parking for the commercial users on the site. There are some sidewalk design guidelines that apply here for Shell Mound Way, a 12-foot wide with a minimum of 8-foot clear pedestrian way, and a 4-foot landscaped area is required. This is the requirement that are applicable for the pedestrian priority zone sidewalk requirement. And for Christie Avenue, the sidewalk width is 15 feet with 8-foot clear pedestrian way, 5-foot landscape area, and a 2-foot building entry public space between the pathway and the private property. And this is the requirement of the Green Street, which Christie Avenue is considered in the general plan. The plans do indicate, generally speaking, 15-foot sidewalk widths on both the street frontages, but as part of the letter of incomplete, one of the things that they need to provide and demonstrate is clear dimensional sidewalk widths. So the next time you see this project at a study session, these details would be provided. So the BPAC, the Bike and Pedestrian Committee, was shown this at the last time. I'm including their comments at this time because in terms of their jurisdiction, nothing has really changed, and it's kind of a reminder for the commission in terms of what they had suggested. So they were completely in favor of this 10-foot path, of the understanding that it would be converted to a 20-foot path in the future when the adjacent city-owned parcel is developed. The committee agreed that the interim 10-foot path would get used, and that it was suggested that the lights be included on the path and that the building's northern wall be designed as a living wall. In terms of staff, the comments, it was reviewed at the June DCC staff meeting. The staff generally like the design of the project and have requested that the plan set includes appropriate sections that would produce the shadow lines that you see in the renderings. This is something that staff has struggled down the road in past projects where the renderings do show certain shadow lines, but they do not get translated into elevations, and then at the building permit stage, there's a lot of back and forth, which I think all parties can avoid. So that is the reason I'm sure I would like them to include sections showing all the different indents in the design to clarify that they will actually be produced when constructed. Staff is also recommending that since the parking provision will involve groundwork below groundwork, that testing should be done to make sure that the site does not have contamination. Staff notes that a lot line adjustment is shown in the plan set that shows an exchange of property between city and the applicant. So these details will be included, a lot line adjustment application will be included as part of this project. Staff also noted that the plan set needs a circulation plan, a trash plan, and a more defined bicycle parking plan, among other things, to complete the application. In terms of environmental review for this project, at the July 19th meeting, the council approved a contract with Urban Planning Partners to prepare a CEQA-compliant environmental document for this project. It is anticipated that an EIR, or Environmental Impact Report, would be required for this project, as this includes a general plan amendment. So, as this is a study session, it's customary for us to come up with some questions for the commission. And first is the proposed mix of uses. Is the commission satisfied that the mix of use is appropriate for this project? In terms of bonus points, does the commission think that the bonus points should be granted for provision of a community gallery, which is about 2,000 square feet, as well as the community open space in front of the community gallery? Does the commission have any other suggestions for bonus points? And while, as I'd mentioned, that the construction of the 10-foot wide path of the project does not qualify for bonus points, however, the bonus points may be available for design and or construction of the 10-foot wide portion of the path that is not on the project site, i.e. on the city-owned site to the north. So that is a possibility, one possible way that the bonus points can be used. Obviously, we would be happy to listen and hear any comments that you have on the design of the project. Regarding the pedestrian and bicycle path, the question we have for the commission is whether the commission agrees with the BPAC's recommendation that the developer build the 10-foot wide path at the time of construction of the project, which can later be reconstructed as a 20-foot wide path when the city-owned property to the north is developed. As I'd mentioned, the project needs a use permit to provide more parking. So the question is the commission inclined to support the proposed parking that is more than the maximum permitted? And if so, what kind of documentation would the commission like to see from the applicant to demonstrate the rationale for provision of this additional parking, and so that the commission is able to make the findings? So that concludes my presentation. I would be happy to answer questions. The applicant also has a presentation, so I'm here for questions now and later.
Thank you, Maru. Are there any questions from the commission?
I have a quick question about what site investigation has been completed to date.
For the toxic, the hazardous?
Yeah.
I don't believe we have not received any kind of phase 1 studies. They will be needed to do an EIR if that is the route.
Yeah.
So at some point, at some point, this phase 1, if it has not already been done, will need to be done very quickly.
Okay.
And you can clarify that from the applicant. They can come and clarify what exactly has been done.
Do we have any more questions for staff? Nope. All right. So at this time, I want to go ahead and invite the applicant to come up and present.
All right, let's see if I can operate this. There we go.
Great.
Thank you, Maru. My name is Bill Schrader. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. I own a company called the Austin Group. I focus on this kind of product, podium products, 6 to 8 stories, all in the East Bay. I don't do any work in San Francisco or down in Silicon Valley. Tonight I've got Dave Johnson with me from Johnson Lyman Architects. Dave's been here before. I recognize most of you. We've got a few new commissioners. So with that, I'm going to see if I can make this happen. So I've got a brief handful of slides, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dave. As Maru indicated, we were here about 18 months ago, roughly, and showed some preliminary architecture and got your input. Spent some time in the community talking to folks about this particular site and what we were thinking about it. And as Maru suggested, we went to BPAC, to the Bicycle Commission, and I presented to them, and it's been about a year ago now. Again, just real quickly, the project overview. This is an 8-story project with 244 units. It's mixed use, got retail on the ground floor, does have the community space, and it has this bicycle connection that we'll talk about a little bit. And then Dave's going to come up and go through some of the evolution of the architecture and some of the changes we've made since we've seen you last. So I'm going to quickly go through this. You saw this already, and just point out for anybody who's not familiar with the site, Lazy Boy to the south, the old Premier Crew building is the city-owned building north of us. So if you'll recall, some of you that were on the commission at the time, this was just a very preliminary architectural first cut that we did. And the comments that came out of it, I want to go over because I think it's important in terms of the evolution since over the last 18 months to 2 years. One of the things that was suggested is that the project, as it was displayed here, was too kind of inwardly focused, and that needed to be kind of more open to the community and to the public, and that it needed to take advantage of the south exposure for that southern sun coming in through off of Christie and Shell Mound at the corner. And then lastly, the question was asked of us that night, would we consider doing a high-rise on this at this location? And I think if I recall right, everybody said, yeah, why don't you go check that out? So what's depicted here is the actual work that Dave and I did, mostly Dave, over a period of 6 or 8 months. This was a 20-story high-rise with 360 rental units. We spent some time once we got this put together in a form that you could kind of look at and understand. We spent a number of months with various high-rise developers from San Francisco, frankly, that do mostly condo development. But unfortunately, at the end of the day, we just couldn't make the economics work. I mean, the kind of quote that you hear is San Francisco construction costs and East Bay rents. That's what you always hear, and those generally don't work. We also, at the time, in the second review, got a number of additional comments on the architecture, which Dave's going to go over, as well as this. This is what is depicting the actual land trade or swap between us and the city, which is net, we're giving up about 2,000 square feet. And the logic really held, because really what we were doing was following the both Christie and Shell Mound streets to provide a 15-foot consistent sidewalk all the way around the project. Once we got that done, that helped us develop this next round of drawings. One of the things that I did when I did go to the CPAP meeting is we talked about this kind of betwixt and between where we are today in the market with parking. I've been doing this kind of parking flexibility now on a number of projects. In fact, we did this, we actually showed something similar to this in Berkeley last week. What this shows and what I did that night with CPAP is suggested that these parking lifts are the very most efficient way you can provide parking, but it's also the most efficient way you can take away parking. Each one of those spaces represents 3 cars. So the way to do this, as we get into more alternative transportation, whether it's express buses to San Francisco, or it's additional BART or merry-go-round, or whatever you want to call it, whether it's Lyft and alternative methods of transportation, someday in the future, I don't think any of us knows when, we are going to need less parking, and I think it'll get less and less over time. So one of the ways to do that is to replace these lifts with units. And what this shows is on the bank on the north side, next to Premier Crew, where the bicycle path will come through, we would take out 50 parking spaces and replace it with 5 units. Something similar could happen on the east side of the building, where we would take out another about 50 parking spaces and put in another 5 units. And this is something that's as easy to do as disassembling these puzzle lifts, filling in those pits, and then you can build units, and we just have to do the exterior work. So with that, I am going to turn this over to Dave, and he will do his architectural magic. And then if you need me, let me know. And by the way, Maru and Charlie are great to work with. We've really enjoyed it so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Dave Johnson with Johnson Lyman Architects. I wanted to just briefly go over this. I know Maru did a great summary of the project, but from the beginning, the goal was to respect the history of Emeryville with the factory loft imagery, the brick, the sash windows, forged steel type of elements. And the project's evolved since the last 2 times we've seen you. I have above is the smaller picture is before. Obviously, the bigger is our proposed, and probably the biggest change from before to now is raising the base of the architecture up to the 2nd level, reducing the brick at that level. It also brings provides a nice base for the project. The retail is more pronounced. Adding the trim elements at the top and the middle of the building helps to articulate the building. So I think that's a tremendous improvement. We also have a hanging canopy, which we had before, but it will be covering the sidewalk and integrating the architecture with the retail in terms of a nice retail presence. Moving down Shell Mountain a little bit, the goal here was also to layer the architecture with the 2 different tones of brick and the terracing. The terracing really helps create a nice presentation to the street. We're terracing up at the 6th level and the 7th level, the architecture back. Again, layering the architecture, but it also helps open up the plaza in the center to more sunlight. Plaza is basically a south-oriented plaza. We have about a 70-foot aperture at the street. It narrows down to about 40 feet. But the plaza will be an exciting place to be. As Maru mentioned, we'll have all kinds of activities, lounge areas, play areas, barbecues, all the types of activities that the residents will enjoy using.
It's good to have a base.
This is moving a little bit farther down Shell Mound. We have, again, the 2-tone brick, the higher base. You'll see on the right-hand side, that's our elevator lobby for the secondary entry for the residential, and also that's our courtyard for the community space that we're trying to provide here. It'll be we're trying to activate that corner, provide a nice space there. We are going through the family-friendly units. We're getting closer. I know it's very important to get these designed so that they're not your typical units, creating nice entry statements. So we're working with Maru on getting to that point. And as she mentioned, we're at the percentages that are required with 1, 2s, and 3s in terms of overall percentages. The materials, I brought a materials board, but again, it's evoking the factory loft type of feel, 2 tones of brick, the forged steel, cable rail, the stucco. All this we feel is coming together to provide a nice statement at that intersection and a nice addition to the area. So that pretty much is it. Be happy to answer any questions, but we're excited to move forward.
Thank you, Dave. Are there any questions from the commission for the applicants? All right. At this point, this is not a public hearing. This is a study session. So I'm going to open up for public comment on any. Would you like to speak?
I get to represent the entire city, so I have a couple. I have a couple questions. One is for the transit hub. Are there buses now that actually go directly to San Francisco? And if not, when exactly are those buses coming online? That's one. The second thing is, and here I really want to, maybe there's a little chart of this. I want to know the monthly rental schedule for the affordable units, and also I'd like to know the monthly rental schedule for the market rate units. And I would appreciate a little diagram and Excel spreadsheet of that. That would help a lot. So those are my, oh yeah, and then if approved, approximately when would this project begin and how long would construction take? Those are all my questions
Thank you.
so far.
Chair Guerrero, can I take the best question?
Yes, but I'm going to open it to see if anybody else wants to comment before we move forward. And I don't see any other comments. So we're going to go ahead and close public comment, and now we can open it up back to the commission. You're welcome to start, Commissioner Keller.
So just to answer your question a little bit more fully, in terms of Transbay service, there's at least 4 buses a week or a day that go through this. The actual routes, I can't remember offhand, but they're the double-decker buses that come to this direct right down this street.
J.
Yeah, the J is definitely one of them.
J,
One, I think there's
the F.
the
F.
Z. Well, the F is the I haven't gotten to the F's yet because these are just the commuter hours. But there is the F Transbay bus that runs 7 days a week, and it runs every half hour, and it goes right by this building as well. So there are at least 4, if not 5, Transbay buses that serve this area.
I don't think I'm allowed to answer you, but I do have comments in rebuttal that I will write to you.
And then also, along with the Transbay buses, there is the 36 that goes to Berkeley and to West Oakland BART. There is the 57, which will take you to the Kaiser Hospital. And there is the 29 that also serves West Oakland, as well as all the immigrant rounds in this neighborhood pass by that building.
Thank you, Commissioner Keller. Do you have any more comments or questions?
Not in her questions, no.
Great. Commissioner Thompson.
I guess I have a question why the applicant isn't, clearly articulating the transit connectivity in the package. And I think that's just a recommendation. I would say that, obviously there's a citizen asking this. This should be presented as, a transit-friendly location, and the buses that go by should be noted and their level of service, because one of the things that has been interesting over the last couple months is that the J had to actually increase service to make sure that commuting hours could be met, and that may be a consideration as more and more people are added to the service, is how the level of service matches the need. So I just want to put that out there as a comment, is that this should be clearly part of the package since you're in this location.
Maru, can we have the issues to be considered here on the screen for us, please? Thank you. Do you have any more comments, Commissioner Thompson?
Well, I want to address her.
Yeah, you got it.
Her things too.
I think there may have been 2 pages of issues, correct? Yeah. Okay.
The thing is I'm going to want to, in my comments, I'm going to want to refer to other items in the illustrations.
You got it.
And we usually go through the items at the end.
What would you like to be helpful?
I was, if we are at the point where we are giving them guidance, then I'm happy to go through these.
Yes.
Okay. So mix of uses, I understand this to be primarily residential with some supporting ground level activation, that commercial space, retail, office, bike. I think all of those and that combination, the applicant has also mentioned this is a podium product. Those are known products to me, and I think that's a good use in this location. The bonus points, I wouldn't limit it to the gallery. But I do think that a public use of that type would be a good thing. Just because we've already talked about the Sherwin-Williams Gallery and, and this question about the overuse of any one use. Just want to make sure it's right for the location. So I think that's my only comment on that. I don't think I have other suggestions. The construction of the 10-foot wide path. I think it's a good strategy. And I'm trying to parse this question because it's not a bonus point, even though it's in the bonus point section. So what do you need from me?
Okay, so the issue here, I mentioned that the 10-foot that they are providing for the bicycle pedestrian will not be counted as bonus points because it's a requirement.
Yeah.
However, ultimately, the goal is to provide a 20-foot standard pedestrian and bicycle. They can get bonus points if they contribute to the city in some form, either in design or in construction, when we construct that 20-foot. So it's basically helping the city to construct,
Okay, yes.
doing its part on that side.
And for the commission's benefit, or anybody who's watching or listening, if you aren't aware of it, the city owns the property to the north. And so it would be redeveloped at some point in the future, and we would make sure that the other half of that path would be included in the city's project.
Okay, so, and I think in that case, I would support that strategy as a bonus point opportunity. And then you had another list?
So the other list basically talks about the use permit for over parking. Does the commission support that, and and if so, what kind of documentation would like to see?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me started on parking, but I think in general, because parking is always such a big component of good urban design, is reducing the parking and making a walkable environment, and parking tends to work against that. So I support the podium quality here. I would prefer that they were within the requirements. So I do want to see lots of evidence as to why they need to be outside those requirements. And I also want to just draw attention to the question around minimum parking standards, although it is not part of this. I did want to bring up the point that an applicant is coming before us asking to provide parking in excess of the maximum. So if you, in this case, I want to clarify, if we were to reduce minimum parking standards, it would have absolutely no effect on an application like this.
That's correct.
Okay.
And I would point out that the Ani project across the street is asking for the same thing. And any change to the minimum parking requirements likewise will not affect the maximum or the requirement for a use permit to exceed the maximum.
Okay. Okay, so in terms of that market justification, and I think the applicant was actually beginning the process of talking about responding to change over time and what strategies might be employed, understanding when those might happen, understanding how those would happen in detail. That is going to be a key component of any approval for an excess of the required amount of parking, for me personally. And in general, I think I just do want to state that that anything we can do to reduce parking provision in general and make a successful project, I would support. So it will definitely be a high burden to go over those limits. The only comment, detail on design, or the only comment on design that I have overall, I actually appreciate the design. I think it's looking quite handsome right now. The only thing I would suggest is looking at a little bit in the proportioning of the windows. You have some sort of vertical and then horizontal things happening that aren't necessarily helping compositionally. I do like the upper level 2-story, more vertical windows. I do like the bottom level, more vertical component, and then there's some horizontal things in the middle. So it's a little bit less smooth than I think it could be. And then the only other comment would be the top of the building, a lot of the traditional architecture, historic architecture has a high level of detail at the top. You're close to that. I know you're using modern or contemporary construction techniques, so there will be differences there. But I would say investigate that top level and see if there's a way to add detail there. Have I addressed everything is my question.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Guerrero?
Yes.
May I just make a comment? Sorry, I meant to make this earlier.
Mm-hmm.
The notion of replacing the parking on the first floor with residential units, personally, I think that's a good move. However, I would note that they are already near or at the maximum number of units under the residential density for the site. So that would probably kick it over what is permitted, even with the bonus. There's a couple of ways to address that. One would be to just eliminate units from the upper floors and put them down there on the lower floor. Another way to do it, I believe Miru's zoning analysis showed that they were below the maximum permissible floor area ratio. And there are other uses that they could put there that would count as floor area but would not count as residential units. And therefore, they wouldn't need to eliminate any residential units, but still put an active use in that space that wasn't technically residential. For example, live-work units. Those would not count as a residential unit against the residential density, or it could be some other sort of active non-residential use. So that's just a suggestion.
One other comment on design too is, and just advancement of design, because I know you mentioned that the floor plans are in preliminary and you're making sure they're family friendly. I would also say sustainability is really important. Understanding how a podium project can have a high level of sustainability. It's great to see the southern access for the outdoor space. Love to see shadow study and understand how much sunlight and what times. Also love to understand the energy usage of the building. You know, are you making LEED levels? Are you not? Are there other sustainability strategies that can be applied?
Thank you. Commissioner Donaldson?
Okay, I think that the mix of uses is appropriate for the site. I do, again, share the concern with Commissioner Thompson about activation of the street. I don't know that a community gallery at this location is going to activate the street. I think it needs to be something that is more engaging, because we have a number of galleries in the area already. And mix of uses, bonus points. I would prefer to see, I think that the widening of the bicycle path makes sense for bonus points, but I'd also like to see looking at some of the sustainability factors that going towards a zero net energy building would be really, really, I think it's getting more and more important every day, and we need to move in that direction. That's my notes here. Yeah, so I think that the energy and sustainability factors would be really important to me. The conditional use for providing more parking, I agree with Commissioner Thompson that we really need to see a deeper analysis of that, explaining why that needs to happen. And looking at these alternative transportation situations, there's no street parking, there's no street pull-off, there's no place. We really do need to see circulation and loading, and if people are not going to have cars, I presume that people will be using other things that are going to pull up to the front of the building and try. I really need to understand how that is going to work better. So circulation, loading, pickup, bus, all of that kind of thing. Again, it's going to be a more and more congested area, especially if there's an enormous project that goes on the other side of the street. So that is something that's going to require a lot of thought and a lot of coordination, I think. I do like the idea that if there is a lot of parking, if there's more parking initially, that it can be reduced. I think that that is a good strategy as well, whether it's different kind of residential or residential related use, but again, something that's active on the ground floor level. I am finding the combination of the bricks and the different kinds of windows and the recessed pieces, I'm finding that has become too busy and a little bit it doesn't feel as integrated as I would like the building to feel. It has too many things going on, and I'm usually someone who says, I'd like more articulation. I don't like solid flat walls and things, but I think it's moved a little bit too far in the other direction. And I know this is a really preliminary stage for, especially for the courtyard, but we have family-friendly units. We need to see family-friendly things in the courtyard. It looks like a completely adult space down there now, and you need to show how kids are going to be using that space. And also, I'm concerned with the shadow study. It is facing the southern direction, but it's pinched off by tall elements, and I'd like to understand how usable that really is going to be in terms of the light that gets in there. Ground level, the sidewalk needs a little bit more work and detail. I mean, I realize this is an early stage, but there are a lot of things that we're looking forward to see working out a little bit more.
Thank you. Commissioner Young?
Hi, thank you for your presentation. It's really kind of cool looking building. I am satisfied with the proposed mixed use where you have the 244 resident rental units and the commercial space to go in there. The community gallery, I took a look at it and I thought maybe there might be a place that there could be, I don't know if we could talk to the Arts Commission about taking some location, some kind of wall of some form. Maybe you would add a little, maybe we can get some bonus points out of that.
I'm sorry, taking a...
Can we consider understanding from either the Arts Commission or somebody like that would be able to use that back wall or one of those back along the bike path, that it could be some kind of like neat art space that would be a public art adding to that where you would divide on that north side of that property line.
The project will have a public art requirement. However, it's not up to the city to determine how that public art is implemented. That's totally up to the applicant, but you can suggest things that you would like to see.
Yeah, so some of the ways that some of the terraces and some of the horizontal walkways and driveways could have something really interesting that might be kind of fun to look at, might be a little bit historical, bring back a little bit of what you guys had driven from these industrial-looking buildings projects, maybe bring something in reliefs or patterns or something in that sense. I'd love to see this project in VR, like a virtual reality version, to be able to kind of see it, because that upper space where you guys have that courtyard is pretty exciting, and it's a very complex space, and so it's kind of, even someone who might be seasoned in looking at this could get a feel of it, but that enclosure is really unique, and it's not like a box. Now it's a pie shape that's has a lot of subtractive and additive volumes in it. So I think it'd be kind of like interesting to see what that would look like. I like the terraces a lot. Let's see. Oh yeah. So another thing that this elevator that you guys have for the elevator lobby, one thing I don't see in this building is kind of like an emphasis where the vertical circulation is. It's just like, see it like a celebration of entry. You kind of get it on this lower part where you kind of walk in and you get this entry, but maybe that's where a change of material would be, to really just emphasize where that front main door is. Maybe what Gail, Commissioner Donaldson was kind of mentioning, because maybe it's a lot of complexity. Maybe it just needs some clear accesses. I definitely like Charlie's idea on making the live workspace on the back side as kind of an idea. I'm not really much for one where you use scissor type, complex layered parking spaces, because like in my building right now, our elevator's been down, and building's only 12 years old or whatever, and it's now our 4th day that we're, and it's kind of, and we've lost a lot of days, so I just kind of don't know how that really holds up. Yeah, that's right. I do feel that there's a lot of good base on the contrast. What I really like about having that contrast lighted space is because at night, that corridor could be kind of dim. I had the fortune to live in the hotel and had that view of that building for the longest time, and I always thought like it always looked kind of dank there. And so to kind of bring that white in there, to bring up a little bit of lighting is good. But it may be something to make a significant suggestion on where the front entry really is on that building. Be kind of neat. I am a little concerned about the building across the street and how it's gonna make it look like a fishbowl when somebody's up there. You're up on the 40th or 50th floor and you're looking down, and it becomes a hopefully it doesn't become a kind of unpleasant place to hang out. But I think the architecture is really strong. I think Handicap is really it's a hard site to play with, and I think it's a really wise solution which you're coming up with on that. So that's my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Keller, do you have more comments?
Oh, yeah. I just answered her question. I didn't give you any of my comments yet.
Thank you.
No, I support my fellow commissioners and what we've said. The project has come a ways. There is some elements, but since we're doing this first, I think the mixed use is good. I don't know if a gallery is what would work there. I don't know what will. We're having struggling trying to find space uses for these spaces, but we need to have these spaces to activate the streets. So whether you use a gallery in that space or something else, I think that space is valuable to leave open. And we could talk to the art committee here in town and see if there is a need for another gallery space. The outdoor space I think is useful. That is going to help the whole community will be able to use that. So I think that the use is good. The bonus points for the additional 10-foot I think is something that we should look at. I don't know if it's possible for you guys to design and pay for the construction of that. It seems like it's a very long way off before the city develops those parcels, but I'm thinking maybe a fee that they would pay to help go for that, to develop the design and the construction, because we're not leaving those spaces anytime soon. The corporate yard is going to stay in that building for the foreseeable future, so I don't think we can have them design something in a box. We don't even know what we're planning to build there. But a fee, I think, could go towards that. And I think if we can't get enough bonus points through these things, the gallery and that space, we can get creative with some other items. The parking, I am definitely with Commissioner Donaldson and Commissioner Thompson that I think the building is overparked. I understand that you base your parking on what your financing asks for and that they have certain specs. If not, it's going to be a hard sell to bring up this many spaces over our maximum. I understand I was the commissioner that did say that there is no on-street parking. There is no parking anywhere else around this area, so it might need a little more than what we would recommend, but I don't know that we're up as high as what you're recommending. So you will need to bring back a strong case for anything that you want to go over our limits on that. So in regard to the project directly, I think what's next, what we need to see apart from what was brought up is I'd like to see more details on your TDM, what you're planning for that. I think we're talking about that we would really like to see bike lockers in every new development. We understand there's a bike room, but as a number of us do bike here primarily, I have a locker and I see the value in that, and it is something you can charge rent for, so you can recover that cost of putting those in. But I think some number of private bike lockers is important. We didn't see anything on EV, electric vehicle charging stations. We need to see those, where those are going to be, and there needs to be a good number of those. I realize your plans are preliminary, but I just want to clear the air and make sure that we go in the right direction, that when you do show the street frontage, that you do show the city standard light standards and not the old village type that you have on the street there. The pavers, you kind of showed kind of those shell pattern that is at Embarcadero Center. I would really not like to see that look on the sidewalk in our streets. That's kind of irritated unless you're doing a very old world style. The side lights, the long lights are on the building. Also, I've just walked by your recent project at Stonefire, and to me, those look a little cheap. So I'd like to see that kind of match the level of the building itself. And then going to Commissioner Donaldson about the articulation and too much. I wanted to bring this up, but I don't know that we have to. But over on the far southeastern side of the building, you have these smaller windows that are in very large dark brick openings. And it looks like what happened is you filled in the windows and then put in smaller windows. I could tell you on the page that those are on, it's on P3 and PA21. I think if you just put standard windows in there or didn't put a different color brick in there, that they wouldn't look like an afterthought or something that was modified. I don't particularly care for that look. And I think that might go towards Commissioner Donaldson's giving a more uniform look to the building. And I don't know if we want to bring that up on the TV so other people could see what I'm talking about. But does that make sense to you guys?
That's the staircase. I was just asking.
Okay.
I didn't think those were in units.
Okay. And I mean, they could be that small, but I just wouldn't put the darker brick to accent how they're offset and how they look a little kind of, I think that kind of breaks up the building. Yeah, they're the ones on the far, second to the, no, one more over. Yeah, those there. Yeah.
That's the staircase.
Yeah. So I think if you need small windows there, they could be small windows, but just don't put them in those darker blocks. And I think that might help smooth out and unify the building a little bit. And then, okay, now you've answered that question. And are you also considering daylighting the corridors wherever possible, the inner hallways at any end if there's a possibility? Okay, yeah, I would definitely like to see those daylighted. And if you could show those windows in the plans or something so we know those are daylighted. And then you have the eastern wall that faces the public market parking lot. That first level is really boring, and I think we need to put maybe some grids in there, and maybe, I don't know how, if you have enough planting space, but that could be an art wall, that could be something, but the image of those, and I'm talking about, it's on A2.4, is the wall that, yeah, if you'd like, it kind of gives it clarity, because that wall is really, really plain, and it's just going to have cars parked up against it, but it's going to be really kind of, it looks like the backside of a building, and we're trying to design this equal on all four sides. There you go. So within those niches, I think we could do something. Maybe it's, just grids of iron or something, and then maybe some planters, but look at doing something like that. But I do like the brick, the architectural elements overall, the larger windows. I like the use of the I-beams. But I would agree that on the top of those where the brick pilasters go up, maybe do a cornice on the top of those, maybe a more heightened detail. I think we're losing a lot of details in our buildings today, so I agree with Commissioner Thompson on those, that we could do maybe something a little more interest there. But I think that's my whole list.
All right. So I'm going to just jump right into it and then catch up with what I missed on the points here. The first thing, parking, over 100 spaces. I don't know that that's really something that we can justify in this area. I'd love to see a heavier emphasis on how you're going to promote sustainable modes of transportation for residents there. I think that Transform has a great program called Green Trips that I'd love to hear more about in terms of how residents are going to be able to access those resources. The bike shop and parking on the Christie side doesn't make much sense to me. I would prefer that to be on the bicycle path. I think that makes it more of an active space, and also do like the idea of live-work units on that northern side. I don't remember how many parking spots are in that northern side of the building, but I think it might be half of yeah, so it's 50, and that's half of the over 100 that you're asking for. And so I think that space still could use a lot of work in terms of how to promote these sustainable modes of transit. And I think biking is really what we want to promote here too. The west wall that Commissioner Keller was just speaking about, I agree. I think it looks a little like plain at this point. Maybe an art wall. I know that there's some art pieces that are being incorporated into the design over at some of the proposed units across the street on Shell Mound. That might be a nice way to continue that artwork, so it becomes a path where people can really enjoy that. I see that as a huge canvas for an art space, and I think that might be a nice way to use that wall. The courtyard with the bocce ball. We have a bocce ball court across the street at Emmy. I've never seen anybody use it other than dogs. And we have a couple others around the city, and I don't see them being really used. And so
We use ours on the Greenway.
Great. Okay, so the Greenway is used sometimes.
See if I can.
And so for that space, I think that to Commissioner Donaldson's point, like, why not provide a play space for some of the children that live in the building? Even maybe a sitting area with more seating for residents where they can meet and commune with each other. The gallery, I don't think that that's not something that I would be in favor of. I think of places that people meet and hang out and interact with each other, and I think of coffee shops. And that corner there could be a nice space for people to hang out and enjoy coffee and meet their neighbors. So I know that there's a restaurant space that's being considered there too. I would love for Emeryville to have a jazz bar. And Mr. Tipples comes to mind in San Francisco. It's very small. I can go there any night after work for happy hour and know that I'm going to see a live band there. And it's really small. It's quaint. It's a space that I really enjoy, that I wish we had something like that here in Emeryville. So again, Mr. Tipples Jazz Studio is what I'm thinking of for something in that corner there. The bike path, yes, I'm all about using some bonus points for increasing the size of that or investing more in just more than 10 feet. Let's see. And speaking about the design of the building itself, I think that the color difference was a nice break. I felt like it was heavy before. This time I didn't feel so much that, I didn't feel that as much when I was looking at it. And I also thought about some of the proposals that are happening in the neighborhood, and that color is a color that may match some other design elements that we've seen from other proposals. And so just thinking of that, like, color, that cream color that you've shown us, could work well with some other proposals. So I think that's a nice improvement. That's all I have for now. I know that there may be some other commissioners that want to say some other things before we end here. Commissioner Thompson?
I just wanted to add one point, and this is actually sort of more a point of reference for the commission as we look at multiple developments in this area. I did want to note the south elevation A2.1 of this project is, you show up to 75 feet, and there's a lot of articulation, which I actually find great, and I know you've heard comments on both sides of that. But I do just want to note to the commission that we've seen another project that at the 80th foot mark still has parking podium. So I really appreciate the windows and the residential behind the windows. So, so thank you for bringing this project forward.
All right. Are there any more comments from the commission before we continue on?
I want to support your idea of, coffee houses are a dime a dozen, usually we think. But if my recollection is right, the public market has agreement with Pete's that they won't bring in another coffee place. And I really think that the one thing when I go travel to other cities, they have these really cool coffee places, and ours are just nothing. It's just like there's nowhere here that I really think is a destination. So I think there is the possibility. I know there's a lot of coffee places around, but the public market's not going to get any more that I can see. And so I think there is the viability of that, or a small club or something like that. But I like that space. I think it's great where it is. I think that it's off the street a little bit with the plaza. So I think where it is great. I don't know what the functionality will actually end up being, but I like where it is.
Thank you. I have two more pieces for bonus points. Maybe increasing the stock of moderate housing could be an option. Right now you have just maybe 15 or so, roughly. Mm-hmm. Maybe increasing it to be comparable to what the very low units are available. And the T&C's space. So to speak to Commissioner Donaldson's point about making a space for cars to stop and pick up passengers. This is a really congested area, and I think that's going to be vital. And in planning for the future and less cars that we own personally, I think that there should be some space for T&Cs at this building. or they're not going to stop right there in Shell Mound Way.
Double park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And so that said, are there any other comments here?
Very good project, guys. That's really, really, really nice. I like this. I like the 5-foot mechanical screen along the top, hiding all that equipment up there. It's kind of really good. Is it baffled in any way to prevent a little bit of noise blowing out of there, or is it kind of? What are you guys thinking about? Not, yeah, definitely. We've had noise issues with the very same thing before, so.
All right. That said, do you have any questions or do you need more clarification from us?
I would love to provide a little more clarification on some of the things that came up, if that's possible, because there were some open-ended questions, and parliamentary procedure kind of doesn't make it very iterative, the conversation. So on the issue of LEED, this building will be done LEED Gold equivalent, but it'll be Build It Green, kind of the California standard instead of the Massachusetts standard, which is what we've been doing on all these buildings. We were the first project, Dave and I, in Berkeley after Councilwoman Harrison passed the no natural gas ordinance you may have seen in the paper recently. And on that project, which we'll do here as well, we will push all of those issues as far as we currently can within the current ordinances. So things like Title 24 have not yet been adjusted for this issue. So on that particular project was also an 8-story project. It was about 220 units. It's very similar to this one. We did heat pumps for all the units. We did all electric appliances. We did solar preheat. All of the, we worked very closely with City Lift so that all of the car lifts could be electrified. They're the only vendor in the world that actually has figured out how to do that. So they'll all be electrified. In addition, we will bring in another probably at least 4, maybe 6 electrical charging stations at the flat surface spaces that are on the ground floor. We've been doing conduit so that we can add more if they're needed going forward. I've actually had some fairly deep conversations with Tesla about actually doing destination chargers in this building. That is not a supercharger. It's paid for by the developer and primarily used by the residents. So I've had those conversations as well. There were a few other questions, I think, regarding sort of sustainability and those kinds of things. We're all about that and have been building all these buildings that way. But you can always do more depending upon what technology comes. On that particular project, we did a drop-off. We cut into the sidewalk, very similar, 15-foot widths. We did a full lane cut-in for drop-offs and pickups. As well as a package room in the building. We would do the same thing here. So you'd have places for Uber, get around, and Lyft to drop people off, pick people up, as well as trucks that drop things off, whether it's office supplies or whatever it might be. You get a lot of Amazon trucks now dropping off Christmas presents in the holiday season. We will show that. We didn't do it yet, but we're already thinking about it, and we'll bring that to you the next time around. We'll also probably show you a lot more, call it photo sort of renderings, so they're much more realistic, and you can really see what these spaces in the courtyard are going to look like, maybe what some of the sidewalk treatments will look like. We're not going to do the Embarcadero. Dave pulled that off of the computer and stuck it on there. I know that's what he did. That Embarcadero sidewalk thing. And then the last thing, if you guys are up for it, there's some new VR software. Somebody brought up VR. Was it you, Tito? There's some new software that you can basically take a 2-dimensional drawing, lay it on the table, give each of the commissioners an iPad, and you can literally walk up to that drawing and it'll turn into 3D on your screen. And you can walk around and see what each of the details look like. It's really cool. It's actually, to me, better than building a model, because then you can actually really manipulate it and zoom in and zoom out. So if you're up for that, that's something we could look at doing as well. So there's
I think for a project that is this complex, I mean, it's not a box. I mean, you've got
Right.
all these curves, and you've got all
Right.
these angles within a curve. I think it'd be really important to see, and then you get, that's augmented reality. I think
Yeah.
that's what you're referring to.
Yeah.
And from within the rooms, what they would look like, looking out into that lobby, you can put yourself in a lot of different places.
We usually do renderings of the actual units so you can see what they look like, that kind of thing. The workout room, the bike room, we can do all that kind of stuff.
All these units are singles level. None of them are double layered.
No double layers.
No double-
Yeah,
okay,
they're all
okay.
single.
They're all single. Okay.
Yeah. On the parking, let me make sure you understand what we've done so far, because we didn't present any of that tonight. We've already had a Abrams and Associates in Walnut Creek's a transportation engineering firm. They've already done all the analysis on how many parking spaces we need. It's actually more than we're showing. But as I said earlier, it's going to decline over time. So how do we match what's needed today so the project gets to, call it 95% occupancy, and then in the future stays occupied as we need less and less cars? And that's why the plan that I put together, I think today is the best plan we can do. The project, Commissioner Keller's right. If we did your maximum parking, we'd never finance the project. The lenders, and part of the reason why is the other projects in town have very similar parking to what we're recommending. So we would be at a complete disadvantage in trying to get tenants to come into the building, and the lenders are going to recognize that. That's the issue. So to me, the only way to solve this, and you're not the only body that has the same concern. I go through this in Berkeley and in Oakland and other cities. How do we bridge this gap between needing the parking today and not needing it as much in the future if the site itself is not on a BART lot? The lenders have been lending on these projects, like you're seeing the 30-story over here on that's not West Oakland, that's MacArthur. That has very few parking spaces, but it's right on a BART lot. You can walk to the train.
Right.
This is a lot more difficult to do, and it will be more difficult to finance if we go much below what we're showing. So we'll come back to you with some analysis. And he looked at TDM. I mean, he's a pretty sophisticated engineer. I talked to him about this issue.
I just have a question about financing and the location, because the city of Emeryville has stated that this is a transit location. Are you finding that the lenders and the technical analysts are not thinking that it is the same?
They're not. They're not.
What is their criteria for difference?
Well, listen, I've used the Emery go-round. It's not the same as being in walking distance of BART. It's just not. We haven't figured out how to make buses both nice enough and accessible enough for people to use them. There is talk about an express bus that's going to go right by the front of our project and skip everything right under the Bay Bridge, and you can be over in the city in 10 minutes. If AC Transit does that, that'll help this project a lot. But in the short run, we're going to need whatever parking demand the analysis says we're going to need.
Well, the thing I would disagree with that is, and I don't think your analyst really knows the facts, is that we do have brand new double-decker buses, 3 routes that go directly to the city, as well as the F-bus. I use the F-bus exclusively. I never use BART. BART is a waste of time for me. So I think what is your onus is to convince your financiers that BART is not the end all be all. Matter of fact, BART is becoming less popular because of the crime, its inefficiency, and its problems. So I'm
not here to support BART. I'm just telling you.
No, I know. But what I'm saying is,
if the demand analysis says we need the parking, we need the parking.
Right, but there becomes a time that we need to make the paradigm shift.
I agree.
But
rolling $150 million is not the time to do that, because that's what this is.
But that's what all projects are going to be.
Well, and the other ones won't get financed either. That's what I'm trying to tell you. I've already gone down this path the last 18 months. We've been looking for a partner for this project, and they have been very clear to us. So I think the plan that I presented to the bike committee is the best plan in the short run and the long run. And I just want to make sure you know that's what I am hearing on the other side of, listen, I don't want to, parking spaces are expensive. I'd rather put in units. I mean, I'm not here defending putting in parking unless we have to have it to rent the building.
Yeah, I would say though, following on my comment about needing a high threshold to go against our set regulations, is that the community has stated a preference, and it's our job to kind of defend that preference. And so we do need an extraordinarily high bar. I am a non-car owner. I do take the bus.
Yeah.
So there are a couple of us. It may not be enough for your financiers.
Yeah.
But again, it's their job to demonstrate why this doesn't work, and it will be a high bar. So I just wanted to give you that heads up.
Yeah, we're happy to do the analysis and show you that we need the parking. That's not a problem.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to just finish off with some of the comments that were just made. Parking is a touchy subject right now, and at the APA conference, I remember this being an actual session about lenders and the transition that we need to make for them to be more open to this. And so we understand the complex, like how complex this is. But what I'm hearing from the commission is that we have some hesitation with the number of parking spaces that are being asked. That said, I think that there's a lot of potential for Emeryville to engage in the conversation about a second tube to San Francisco, and this location could potentially be a route in that direction. So thinking to the future, thinking about when this building might actually be ready for people to move in, and the way that things are being built here in Emeryville, I think that is the future. And so we should be planning for that now. Those are my final comments. I want to open it up for any extra announcements or comments from the commission. Nope. I do have one question for staff. I used to use the Click It, Fix It app quite often. I noticed about a year ago that the responses that I used to get were no longer coming my way, and so I would update and report something in the city and never really get a response. That led me to be less active on it, and I'm afraid that is the case for other residents here in Emeryville. So just wanted to hear back from city staff about what's going on with Click It, Fix It, and whether there have been some challenges in terms of responses to requests, and if there's anything that we can do as residents to get more engagement from city staff.
I have to tag on, I quit using it. I used to turn in things and the app just became buggy, and I just quit. I deleted it from my phone.
Charlie, before you continue, sorry. Specifically, I wanted to report a tree that's by it's on the sidewalk by the casual carpool pickup. And recently, somebody broke a branch because it was running really low, and then it's grown back again. And I think that it looks as though it could possibly fall at some point, or somebody could hurt themselves.
John injured his head on that.
Okay.
Yeah, he cut his head on that branch.
So it's happened already, and I walk by there every day when I take the casual carpool, and I'm afraid that may be a liability. And I want to report it on Click It, Fix It, but I don't have any confidence in using that app anymore.
And I think that's on private property. It's on it's in front of Christie Commons, where the old furniture store, secondhand store was. It's been vacant for years now.
Yeah.
And it's the flowering pear tree, and the branch does hang down. I have to stoop down to get under the branch.
Mm-hmm.
So, first of all, let me just clarify that the study session item is now over.
Sorry.
Correct?
Study session is over.
So we're on to planning commissioner comments.
We are. And before you both leave, do you feel as though you have clear direction from the commission?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Appreciate your comments.
Okay.
You got it.
Concerning C-Click Fix, I'm not personally familiar with it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know what it is.
Yeah.
They don't come to me, so I don't know how they get dealt with. But I can look into it and get back to you. And specifically that tree, I will make sure that Public Works knows about that. But if Commissioner Keller is correct that it is on private property, I'm not sure we can do anything about it other than notify the property owner. But,
Okay.
We'll look into it.
Thank you, Charlie.
Yeah, I think if you can notify the property owner that it's their tree and they are liable and people are getting injured, that might motivate them a little bit to take care of it.
All right. Are there any more comments here from commissioners? Seeing none, I'm going to call this meeting to order, or close this meeting at 9:12.